Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and today I have something pretty special for you. I did my first ever Twitch stream, which, by the way, shameless plug, go follow me at twitch.tv/Gavin Verhey for more like this, and I played a variant of a game we play here on the show. The game on the show is called 3 Random Cards, where I hit the random button on Gatherer 3 times and then tell you stories about all those cards. I did that live, but instead of choosing random cards, I took audience requests and covered about 100 cards and cycles over the course of a few hours. Now, the 3 random cards videos are beloved, so I definitely wanted to bring this one to the channel, even though it's a whopper of an episode. So it's been edited down a little bit to get rid of some of the banter back and forth that might not make sense if you're not watching it live, but keep in mind as you're watching, this was originally a Twitch stream. Additionally, I was doing all of this off the top of my head, so I can't guarantee everything's 100% correct. Some of them were also things that people had told me at various points about older cards, but it should all be pretty much accurate. Ready? Let's go. I started working at Wizards of the Coast when Return to Ravnica was the first set that we were working on. So anything from there onward, I can probably tell you a story about. If it's before Return to Ravnica, I can probably tell you either my thoughts on the card, or a fun historical fact about the card, or whatever it might take. So if anyone out there in the chat has a card they are curious about, please post it on in, and I'll start taking a look. Yes, a certain random guy out there. Thank you for joining, a certain random guy. Which card would you like to know about? Vigor Mortis. I remember this from original Ravnica. Excuse me. Besides, of course, the great pun here, Rigor Mortis. I'm going to put the Ravnica City of Guilds version because it feels right. Besides the great pun on Rigor Mortis, which is, of course, when someone unfortunately dies, Vigor Mortis was part of a cycle in the original Ravnica block. So Ravnica was huge. If you weren't playing Magic at the time, when Ravnica came out, there'd never been a set like this before. A set based around 2-color guilds specifically. And it was so much fun to get to play. It totally revolutionized the future of Magic, and I think basically a new era of Magic started with original Ravnica. And so they're trying to find ways to make cards that you could play in 1-color deck, but then also it would be better in a guild deck, because you couldn't just always have all the black-green cards in your deck, for example, at once. Maybe you wanted to go black-red when you were drafting. So this was a cycle they came up with the idea of you can play in a mono black deck. It's totally fine. It's going to be okay. But if you're playing black-green, you get an extra little bonus. And so there's 5 of these. For example, there's some of them are far less memorable than this one, which is at least base a Reanimate. There's, of course, Flash Conscription. Who could forget this card, right? The 6-mana Active Treason that gives it lifelink. Or Induce Paranoia, one of my favorites. A nice little mill card here. But yeah, there were a bunch of these. Glimmer Baron. Yeah, let's talk about Glimmer Baron. What the heck is happening with this card? So this card has quite a history. So here's Glimmer Baron. We saw this here in Modern Horizons 2, okay? So Glimmer Baron has a couple weird things going on with it. It's a reference to 2 other things in Magic history, and that's why it is so strange. So the first thing it's a reference to, if you don't know Glimmer Baron, it's got this artwork here. It's artwork by Nils Holm. It features this little character, okay? So here's a character, recognize them, love them, etc. Now let me pull up another card. This is a card from the Shadowmoor block, Gilder Baron, which features the exact same goofy character. I'll flip back and forth between them. Here is Glimmer Baron, and here is Gilder Baron in a different outfit. Glimmer Baron, Gilder Baron. Good stuff. So this was actually a creature of Nils' design. So Nils Holm, the artist, came up with the idea for this character, and players fell in love with Gilder Baron when it came out in Eventide. Now this card is wonky. It has the untap mechanic, which we've basically only ever used once in this block. I have tried making new commander cards in commander decks with untap mechanic, and they just never fly. The mechanic is fraught with peril. But Gilder Baron is a very beloved card
from this set. So that's one reference of Glimmer Baron. The other reference from Glimmer Baron is, who there in the chat can guess it? It is Atog. So Atog is a very old creature with the ability to sacrifice an artifact and get +2/+2 until end of turn. It is a 1/2 creature. You can sacrifice something to give it +2/+2, and this gave way to a lot of other cards, many other Atogs in Magic's history. Of course, there's Psychotog, perhaps one of the best known Atogs out there. Dr. Teeth, as he was called in competitive play. And the lesser known ones, here's Thaumatog. Who could remember this guy right here? We can sack a land or an enchantment to give it +1/+1. Or, as we all know, the best Tog out there, I can't believe this is a real Magic card, Atog, where you can sacrifice an Atog to give it +X/+X, where X is the sacrificed Atog's power. By the way, this is a Commander playable card. It is a legend. It could helm your deck. So if you want to jam all your Atogs in one place and, bring out all the 4 Atogs of the world, you can go for it. Oh yeah, Megatog. Let's not forget this little Mirrodin creature. It's fun fact, actually, because Atog, the original version of Atog here, showed up all the way back in Antiquities. Super, super far in the past. And then it wasn't reprinted, except for in revised, but it wasn't really reprinted, revised, 5th edition, all the way until Mirrodin. And the flavor text in the Mirrodin version actually references Dominaria. Now, how did an Atog get from Dominaria to Mirrodin? Well, there's a bit of a funny story in the Scars of Mirrodin, in the Mirrodin storyline, where they set up these soul traps. And these soul traps basically catch creatures from all these different planes. Because Mirrodin was a created plane by Karn. It has no natural denizens. So the soul traps basically captured creatures from around the multiverse and then ploop, dropped them onto Mirrodin. And that is how the Atogs got from Dominaria all the way to Mirrodin. So there's quite a story for you about the card Glimmer Baron, but hopefully, MTG Girl, that is a rare roundabout way of telling you all about how this card came to be. That's also, for example, Videlkin show up for the first time on Mirrodin, but then they come up in Ravnica later on, and Kaladesh later on. And because they were from those planes, potentially. Leonin, I think that's also the first time we see them. We've seen Panther creatures in the past, of course, like Jedit Ojanin, but I think that was the first time we saw the Leonin as well. So a lot of creatures from around the multiverse were seated there. Oh, Chaos Orb. Yeah, so Chaos Orb, definitely before my time. For reference, I'm 31 now. I started playing Magic when I was 11, and I was still 8 years too late on Chaos Orb. This card was released when I was 3. Chaos Orb, what a Magic card. So if you're not familiar with this card, it was a real non-silver bordered Magic card from Alpha and the associated stats Beta and so on, where you flipped it from the height of at least 1 foot and then destroys whatever it touches. These days, it's banned in basically any Eternal format, and in Old School, where it's played, there's some specific rules about how the card is played, but you do still involve flipping the card from a height of at least 1 foot. This is not a thing we do anymore. When Richard Garfield was making Magic, he had no idea it was going to be as big as it is today. He just had no clue. And so he tried putting a bunch of just a diaspora of things in there. And the idea at the time, although it sounds wild, was they would make Magic, great. And if that was successful, they'd make another card game with the Magic system. No problem. Turns out that Magic game was pretty darn popular, and they stuck with it. But so in the initial set, he just thought he'd release all kinds of different unusual stuff. And Chaos Orb was one of those. Of course, Chaos Orb is the one everyone knows, but don't sleep on Falling Star, another card which requires you to flip and onto the playing area from a height of at least 1 foot. This one from Legends. So yeah, it was a wild time in Magic. You'll not be seeing any of these anymore outside any potential future unsets. Unsets, however, get the monopoly on this kind of effect for the players. All right, I've got a few questions in the can here, so I want to pop into and do those. It's not about a card, but I'll let it slide. From KP539000, that's a big number. We have questions about Amplify, which I'm going to pull up one of my personal favorites, Glowering Rogon, to to explain to you. So Amplify is a mechanic that showed up in Legions. It's basically only in Legions. Now, Glowering Rogon is, and the Amplify mechanic is the mechanic where when you play it, you can reveal other cards with the same type from your hand to give it +1/+1 counters. And this is a very simple version of the card. There are some that got more complicated and based things off of their counters. For example, Daru Stinger here, which, by the way, for a while was eroded to be a human, and then it was totally busted in throwback drafts. It was eroded back to a soldier. Fun fact about this. But the Amplify mechanic in general, the problem with the mechanic is on cheap creatures it can work, but there are creatures that are very swingy, because early, when your hand is full, they're awesome, and if you top deck them late, they're really bad, which also makes it hard to make big creatures with Amplify, because late in the game, they're just not going to do anything, right? You're going to draw it, you're going to have your poor Glowering Rogon, which, on turn 6, it's probably a 4/4, maybe a 5/5 on a good day. So I don't think we'll see too much Amplify soon, but it's not impossible. One of the things I love about Commander decks, for example, is that we can reach back into our bag of tricks and pick some really weird mechanics to use. So I would not be surprised if someday, maybe in a Commander deck, maybe in a Masters product, or excuse me, a Horizons product, we did another Amplify card. But you're not going to see a ton of them, I think. Sorry to all the Amplify fans out there. Going on down to May 1 DYY, Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. Yes, this is from Battle for Zendikar. I'll pull up the BFZ version here. So this card had some interesting stuff going on. We were working on Battle for Zendikar, and we knew we were going to have these big Eldrazi. Made sense. We wanted a way to cast them. The problem is we hadn't really found a great way to do that without powering up all of the cheaper Eldrazi. As I'm sure you all know, Eye of Ugin ended up being extremely powerful, and I'm blanking on the name, but the one that just taps for 2 mana to cast a colorless spell, or an Eldrazi from the second set, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But anyway, those two ended up, Eldrazi Temple, the most obvious name possible. Thank you, Silver Swag. That one was really strong. So this time around, what we wanted you to do was make you cast the big Eldrazi with this, not the small Eldrazi. That's not what the cheating out was for. This would help you cast your Kozileks and so on. A fun fact about this card in particular is this artwork. I do want to call this out. So in the Zendikar lore, originally, before the Titans awakened, they were baked into myth as Ula, Ameria, and Kosi. Which, as you can tell, all have connections to their Eldrazi overlords, Ulamog, Emrakul, and Kozilek. And they were baked into the myth of Zendikar. And so this is a shrine to what the Zendikarians believed were gods, and were actually slumbering Eldrazi. So fun fact there. I think there's a few other cards with similar shots of this artwork. Maybe Ancient Stone Idol shows up here? Let's take a look. I don't remember. Does Ancient Stone Idol show up here? No, maybe not. But there's some other cards that reference this piece of artwork, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, let's see here. Thank you, The Spectre. I'm glad you enjoyed Good Morning Magic. It's on IGTV as well as on YouTube, so thank you so much. Kamal, Fist of Krosa. Yeah, let's talk about Kamal here. So Kamal has quite a story. Kamal was the face character of Odyssey. So he showed up for the first time in Odyssey, and actually this was not the first time we saw him, this green version. He showed up on Kamal Pitfighter, the red version from Odyssey. This is kind of a wonky-tonk legend these days. It's a 6-mana, 6/1 haste that taps to deal 3 damage. We made him a little bit differently back then, but he was just Pitfighter. Hung out in the pits, fought things. That's kind of what Odyssey was all about. Well, let's flash forward for a second to Onslaught block. Kamal is different now. He's gone to the Forest of Krosa. He's found green mana. He's basically turned, and now he's aligning himself with the land. And that's kind of the transformation of this card. And although you might see a lot more of this stuff now, for example, different versions of Narset or different versions of Samut, these days, or back in these days, that was really wild, right? To have 2 colors, a color shift between a character. Wow, that was huge. And I remember when Kamal Fist of Krosa came out, that was quite a talking point. Gameplay-wise, this card does have one problem, which turned out to be a bit of an issue. And that problem is that Kamal Fist of Krosa can target your opponent's lands. So although it looks like a very noble cause, animate your lands, overrun, attack, it's a great time. In actuality, people would play it with, say, Goblin Sharpshooter, which can tap to deal 1 damage to a creature, and then untaps if a creature dies, to just machine gun kill all of your opponent's lands. So that is something I would fix in retrospect. And you'll note that when we came out with Commander Legends, Kamal Heart of Krosa, the 3rd evolution of Kamal here, can now only target your lands. So we kind of fixed it that time around. And this is a direct reference, of course, to the previous Kamal. Kamal's sister is Jeska. Some of you might recognize her here. She's got this very old card. Once again, super weird. 4 mana, 3/1 first strike haster that taps to deal a damage. Kind of like Kamal. Thank you, Sunweb Kid, for the follow. Much appreciated. But what I was really happy about is in Commander Legends, we finally did it right, and we released a proper Jeska as a Planeswalker, because she is a Planeswalker, and we had Kamal and Jeska in the same set as partners. So there you go. Right now, I'm going to talk about Arcanum Wings. Here's a wonky card from Future Sight. Okay, so Future Sight set with a billion mechanics, the most mechanics of I think any set in history. Maybe Modern Horizons 2 beat it finally, but of any standard legal set, certainly the most mechanics. And one of the things it did was put mechanics on cards that didn't exist anywhere else. It was the first time they were anywhere. And Aura Swap was one such mechanic. Now, if you love Aura Swap, you might want to cover your ears for the next point. But Aura Swap is unlikely to make a comeback. The problem with Aura Swap is it's basically extremely weak, or it's used to cheat stuff into play and be broken. So, the classic combo with Arcanum Wings is something like Eldrazi Conscription, which is, okay, play Arcanum Wings on my creature, put Eldrazi Conscription on it, go to town. There's not really a lot of noble things that happen with Arcanum Wings. So we'll probably not be seeing any Aura Swap cards anytime soon, but once again, I will note Commander decks and Horizon sets are always kind of a bastion for these cards, and I enjoy looking for places to put them. So you never know. Maybe we'll find an Aura Swap card out there someday. I think we looked at it for the brand new Commander deck that came out, the Bant Commander deck, which I have actually a video coming out on my YouTube channel tomorrow where I'm opening up all 4 decks. So if you're curious about what's in that deck, you want to see the cards in person, be sure to tune in to check out that unboxing of all 4 decks. So there you go. There's some facts on Arcanum Wings. All right, let's go down here. Silumgar, the Drifting Death by C. Diego FC. Hopefully you're still there. Sorry for taking some time to get to you. Yes, this one I can tell you many stories about. So, Silumgar, the Drifting Death was in Fate Reforged. Fate Reforged was a set I was on the design team for, and it was one of the hardest sets I have ever worked on to get right. And here's why. It was the middle linchpin set between Khans of Tarkir and Dragons of Tarkir, and so it had to be drafted with both. Additionally, you're in the past, so it kind of has its foot in both worlds. You have to kind of try and figure out how it's going to interact with both, and how it's going to show off both elements. At the time, Dragons of Tarkir didn't exist yet, so how are you going to hint to players of what's to come? And one of the really early things we did was write down all the tropes we thought would be really fun. What would be the things that... I love time travel. I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I love anything with time travel in it. So we wrote down all of the time travel tropes, basically, to try and figure out what would be fun things to do. For example, I will tell you one of my favorite gags in the set, which is this card. Give me just a moment to pull it up here. It's a Yeti, who we all love. No, it's not a Yeti. What is it? I think it's a Yeti. Give me just a moment. I'm going to search for it. Yeah, this guy. Summit Prowler. This is one of my faves because it shows up in both Dragons of Tarkir and Khans of Tarkir. And the only difference between the two is it's got dragons in the background in the Dragons of Tarkir artwork. You would probably never notice it if you weren't looking for it, but dragons here. So this was a funny gag to us of like, oh, it always exists. Haha, the cockroach that never dies. But most things changed. And one thing we thought would be fun to set up was, what if we saw the dragons here when they were young before they showed up in in Dragons of Tarkir proper? So, yeah, we basically wanted to make smaller versions of them here, and we gave all of them dragon tribal synergy to really hint that they had a dragon mechanic, right? If you look at Atarka as an example, Atarka, the world render, whenever a dragon you control attacks, it gets double strike until end of turn. So we wanted to play that up a little bit there. And then, of course, we see Silumgar in the very next set, Dragons of Tarkir, and there they are elder dragons, which is pretty cool. Thank you for the question, and let's see. I'm going to keep on going. All right, Chill Mill 1, gotta love some chill, gotta love some mill, asks about Spiny Starfish or Floating Dream Zubera. I'm going to go for the Floating Dream Zubera because I love Kamigawa. I'm working through my way here, so thank you all for your patience on getting to your cards. Okay, so Floating Dream Zubera. There was a cycle of Zuberas in Kamigawa block. They were all 2-mana creatures that were 1/2s, and when they died, you got an effect for each Zubera that died that turn. So you wanted them to all die at the same time because then they would all see themselves. You could do things, of course, where one died, and then later on a different one died. You got, draw a card from this one, and then when you played, I think it's Emberfist Zubera, if I remember correctly. Yeah, then if your Ember's Fist Zubera died, you dealt damage. But you really wanted them to all die at once. So the key strategy with this card in draft was around this, and it was one of my favorite sideways decks to draft, was with Devouring Greed. You would get as many Zuberas as you could. You would play them all while your opponent was just running you over and over. And then out of nowhere, you would just cast Devouring Greed, sacrifice like 5 Zuberas. All of your Zuberas would go off for 5. You would drain them for 10. And, if you got the Emberfist Zubera, for example, you would just kill them outright. There's also another one that lets you sack to give +3/+0. I think if I find it here, it is, this card, Devouring Rage, is the other version of this effect. That was a really fun deck to draft. And it was one of the first sideways draft decks. Kamigawa was actually revolutionary for draft in a little ways because there was this weird Zubera deck, and there was also the Honden deck you could draft as a sideways deck. And then my personal favorite that blew everyone's mind was Dampened Thought, where you would actually mill people out using Dampened Thought and drafting as many of them as possible. This was seen as basically an unplayable card until someone came up with the Dampened Thought deck. So there's a fun story about the Zubera. One thing I do want to call out that's often forgot about, but I don't want to forget about him all the way, is this random card, Rushing Tide Zubera, which doesn't work like the other Zuberas at all. It's just a random blue uncommon 4-mana 3/3 Zubera, and there's a random red uncommon 4-mana 3/3 Zubera that don't work like the other Zuberas. For some reason, in the next set, in the two sets later, Saviors of Kamigawa. Why? Why is that true? I don't know. It's just what they did. Okay. I talked about Atarka a little bit already, Mox Amber. So if it's okay, I'm gonna just skip over you a little bit because I talked about Atarka. Maybe I can talk about just that one fun story really quick about this Atarka. There was a lot of debate around this card internally as if it would just be too easy to kill people with it. One of the things about tribal-based strategies is we want you to have to play a whole tribe because we want you to have a lot of them in play. Atarka, you can play it with dragons. It's also just a 7-mana 12/4 flying trample creature. So there was a lot of worry about, are people just going to play this card and kill each other in standard? It didn't really end up happening, which is good, but I remember that being a point of discussion. So there's a little mini story for you. Okay, Negative Skew, thank you for your patience. We're going to get to Rayhan, last of the Abzan. If I ever do this again, I might make a little section that is queuing up which cards I need to talk about. But anyway, let's talk about Rayhan, last of the Abzan. So one of the things we did in the C16 was partners. And when looking for partners, we had to make a lot of legends. So one of the things we did was look at lesser known story characters or things we could show off. And a fun fact about the commander decks at this point is they panned all across space and time. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to show off a character that no longer could exist, right? He was the last, or died at one point. And poor Rayhan did not make it, as it turns out. Last of the Abzan, the dragons took him down. And anyway, so I love doing those kind of flavor nods here. It was one of the original partners. Original partner is a mechanic that was extremely powerful and we have to be very careful with. Now, the Commander Legends ones I think went over pretty well, which is great. But it took a really long time to get them right. It took literally years. We delayed the set in part for over a year because we wanted to get the partners right. Now, what the new partners did that I think worked out well is they were monocolored. Because one of the biggest strengths of Rayhan and the partners from C16 is you could just play a 4-color deck with 2 cards in your opening hand instead of 1, because you get the double commander potential. So 2-color partners, I don't expect to see a lot more of those. 1-color partners, if the time is right, I imagine we will see them. Sunweb Kid, hello everyone out there. Sunweb Kid asks about Sunweb. Really fast, I'm just going to say once again to everyone who's joined, thank you so much for watching my first stream. I don't normally stream. The fact that there's 40 odd of you hanging out in the chat, and to all those who have subscribed so far or followed, super appreciate it. It really means a lot that you're all hopped on so quickly. I have a lot of stories to tell about Magic, and I didn't know how this would go, but already it's been a blast. So let's keep talking. Let's talk about Sunweb here. So Sunweb first showed up in Mirage with this great artwork, and then eventually showed up later. So this was kind of a weird white sideways theme for a while of walls that couldn't block certain creatures or cards. Oh, thank you, Madaloo, for the follow. Appreciate it. Or cards that couldn't block certain creatures. Thank you for the note, a certain random guy about Rayhan being a woman. I apologize for misgendering them. I actually did not realize that, so you taught me something today, which is great. Sunweb, right. So White had a couple cards like this. The idea was it was a wall with a weak spot. That way there'd be interesting counterplay. If the Sunweb deck was ever too good, then, which is kind of a funny idea in retrospect. But anyway, if the Sunweb deck was ever too good, you could beat it by playing a bunch of cheap weenie creatures. In reality, that wasn't really a factor, but that is kind of where this idea came from. It's an undercosted wall that had a weakness to it. I don't have a ton of stories other than this. It was in 6th, 7th, and 8th edition, and I think this was probably a card that was kind of just grandfathered through them, 6th, 7th, and 8th. One fun fact about it in 7th edition is you'll note the art switch. Here's the 7th edition version. Here is the 6th edition version. 7th edition is the only core set to have all new art for every single card. And it had kind of a more cartoony style, but Sunweb is one of the few that doesn't actually look like it's that cartoony, which is pretty nice. The art style for 7th edition was very controversial. This one, however, stuck and is still here to this day. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Sunweb Kid, for your question. And hopefully that was an interesting answer for you. All right, let's see. Electrical. Hey, Shivam, good to have you here, man. Thank you so much. Hopefully you are still out there. When am I going to reprint Phindomorphic Expanse? Yes, Shivam loves Terramorphic Expanse and Finhorn Elves. I'm going to take a second to just talk about Terramorphic Expanse because it's my own personal love right here. So Terramorphic Expanse debuted in Time Spiral. Okay, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a history lesson, a little bit of a design history lesson. So Terramorphic Expanse showed up in Time Spiral. And it was this really great land. It actually was very innovative. It was a single land that could find all 5 colors, came in tapped. Great mana fixer. Okay, awesome. In Time Spiral. It's in Standard for a while. It's doing good stuff. It's the way of the future. We're going to keep doing Terramorphic Expanse. And I believe it even shows up in the next core set, which is going to be, if I can find the right version. Yeah, it shows up here in 10th edition. All things are good in the court of Terramorphic Expanse. Then something happens. The team is working on Rise of the Eldrazi. And they have a card that they like. Once again, I'm going to try to find the right version here. They have a card that they like and they think is going to make it. But at the very end, toward the very end of design, they have to kill the card. And it used artwork, and they needed to change it out quickly. And they didn't know what they were going to do. So what they did instead was they just turned it into Terramorphic Expanse. But Terramorphic Expanse didn't work in Rise of the Eldrazi flavor-wise. It didn't really make sense with the evolving wilds, as one would say, of Zendikar. So they made a new Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds. And then what kind of happened since then is basically every time we were going to reprint it, there was a reason why we stuck with Evolving Wilds in Standard. Either Evolving Wilds was already in Standard, and we didn't want to put 8 of them into the format, which we have to be careful about because it can create kind of 5-color soupy decks sometimes. or or the setting, once again, just did better for Evolving Wilds, right? Just like, yeah, Evolving Wilds makes more sense on Innistrad than Terramorphic Expanse. So we just kept printing Evolving Wilds. And we haven't really gone back to the Terramorphic well. Now, there is a bit of a happy story here in that we finally got new art for Terramorphic Expanse in Jumpstart with this fine little ditty right here. And this was actually, I will take 100% of the credit on this, or maybe Shivam, if you're still out there, you can take 100% of the credit for this. If you're in chat, say something and let me know. You can take 100% of the credit for this one because Shivam bothered me enough, and I was like, yeah, we should have Terramorphic Expanse with new artwork in Magic. That makes a lot of sense. So I talked to the designer and architect of Jumpstart, and we got new art in there, and hope we can reprint it more someday. For now, we're still sticking with Evolving Wilds in a lot of the main sets, but yeah, maybe someday we'll get Terramorphic Expanse again in Standard. So there's a long story about Terramorphic Expanse, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Let's talk about Fallen Empires. Which card? Let's talk about this card, which is a pretty well-known Fallen Empires card. Right here. Ah, yes, Hymn to Turok. That's right. Here it is right here. This card is iconic, to say the least. This was a powerhouse in early Magic. You would pay 2 black mana and make them discard 2 cards at random from their hand. And you could go Dark Ritual on turn 1, cast Hymn to Turok, and maybe even mana screw your opponent if they discarded 2 lands. Because you discard at random. These days, we very seldom do discard at random because it is a huge feel bad. When you see it, it's often on effects that cost a little bit higher, 4 or 5 mana, because at that point, the variance isn't quite as big of a deal. But man, on those cheap effects like him, it's brutal. I mean, 2 mana to discard 2 cards, by the way, already an incredible rate these days. But making them discard at random was just such a blowout. And this card still sees play in Legacy to this day. It's really swingy because it's bad late in the game, as most discard spells are. But yeah, when I think Fallen Empires, this is the card I always think of, is this one, Hymn to Turok, right here. Okay, got through that one. Now, thank you very much, Magic Untapped. Great to have you here. I believe I know who this is, so thank you for joining. Next up, I think I'm going to go to Sire of Stagnation. Oh man, I just saw Rexiel posted about. I have so many stories to tell about Rexiel and Joda. We'll get down there eventually. Hang in there. We got a few cards. I think about 4 cards in front of you. Okay, so Sire of Stagnation. This card does have a bit of a story. So we were working on Battle for Zendikar, and the Eldrazi are the bad dudes, or bad space aliens, I guess, as it turns out. They're bad. And so Sire of Stagnation, we wanted a blue-black rare or mythic Eldrazi. And Eric Lauer was leading the set. And he was like, here's what I want. The Eldrazi are mean. I just want a card that is super mean. And triggers whenever your opponent does something that they always want to do and kind of turns the mechanic of the set against you. And the idea here is it was sort of reverse landfall. If your opponent is doing the landfall thing, which is what the heroes of Zendikar are doing in the block, you get a reward for it. Now, Eric put this card up on what we call the Mythic Wall. And this is a place where upcoming mythics are put up on a wall, and people can go over and leave comments on them. Of just like, hey, I like this, or I don't like this, or you should change this, just to give high visibility into all the mythic rares in a set. And Sire of Stagnation was like universally hated. Everyone was like, this card is a jerk, I hate it, it looks so frustrating, it's going to trigger whenever an opponent plays a land, I'm going to draw a bunch of cards off of it, it's just going to be miserable to play against, we're asking players to not play lands out, this is horrible. And to Eric Lauer, he's like, nailed it. Because his goal was to make a card that would cause people like a bit of that internal strife. And while good game design principles are to not do things like this, it's really important to have the layering of those good game design principles so that when you break them, there's a good reason. And to me, Sire of Stagnation is a great example of that, we wouldn't do this 99.9% of the time. But that 0.01% it makes sense to do to make it feel like it's transgressive is exactly the right time to do it. So that's a fun story for you about Sire of Stagnation. Thank you, Blind Guardian 98 for following. Thank you once again to everyone who's been following. If I'm in the middle of a story, my inclination is to just keep going. But I notice every time you show up on my screen, I really appreciate it. For my first stream, this has been really, really incredible. Okay, thank you. Oh, Dr. Unks, thank you so much for the following. Got to get off my YouTube terminology. They're not subscriptions here. Okay, let's talk about the next card down here. I just went through Sire of Stagnation. Now let's talk about World Shaper. Yeah. Hello, a certain random guy. Let's talk about World Shaper. And I think there's about 5 cards in the queue right now. So if you're putting yours in now, please be patient. Kind of what I'm doing is I'm just taking cards in, and I'll tell you stories about them when I get to them. So stay tuned. Okay, World Shaper. Let's talk World Shaper. So something weird in Ixalan. Super strange. And this is my little shout out to the professor there. It's a merfolk. One of the really strange things about Ixalan was green merfolk. Really early on, we identified that we were going to do vampires in black-white, and dinosaurs could be green, red, white, and pirates were going to be white, red, black. And then we looked at how the colors overlapped and realized we needed a green, blue archetype. And there were merfolk in the set, and we're like, all right, merfolk it is. So we put merfolk in. But green merfolk is kind of a weird thing. We hadn't done it before. And one of the challenges we had to do was figure out what makes a green merfolk. Why would a merfolk be green? And we tried out a lot of different things. For a while, believe it or not, their main thing was hexproof. Like a ton of them had hexproof. But we pulled away from that because it turns out it was not that enjoyable. And for a while, a lot of them had prowess, which we also pulled back on. So we were looking for ways to do it, especially at rare. And one of the things that we thought would make a lot of sense is interacting with lands. And so this is a merfolk that cares about lands because the merfolk in this setting are the protectors of Orazca, which of course we see, it's the Golden City. We see it on places like Arch of Orazca. Oh, there's a lot more cards with Arch in them than I thought. But on this card, Arch of Orazca, as well as of course on the token it creates, the City's Blessing token. And the merfolk are the protectors of this. So we're working with lands, totally made sense. So yeah, I mean, changelings aside, I don't think there were any green merfolk before Ixalan, the angry red bird. So yeah, fun fact for you there. So there's a little bit for you on World Shaper. Let's keep on going. A lot of cards to get to. Let's talk about Atali. Oh yeah, this one's fun. More Ixalan stories. So Atali, Primal Storm. We were making Rivals of Ixalan, and we knew we wanted to cap off the block with some truly big dinosaurs. So we came up with the idea of doing these dinosaurs that have been around forever, and these would be Elder Dinosaurs, a title that had really only been bestowed to a handful of cards in the past, with the original Elder Dragons, like Chromium. I don't know why Chromium is the one that I thought of, but anyway, with the original Elder Dragons like Chromium, as well as the dragons we did in Dragons of Tarkir, when they were suddenly old dragons, like Dragon Lord Atarka. Cool, good stuff. Well, oh, Gaia Skyfolk. How can I forget to get Gaia Skyfolk? Yeah, I do love that card. But basically, no, it's also an elf, so you know it doesn't get the green side for being a merfolk. Okay, I'll tell you. Here's a card I'll show you, just not to just go on this, but Gaia Skyfolk. It's an elf for the green and merfolk for the blue. Okay, so calling it is a blue merfolk or green merfolk technically, but only barely. So anyway. They're going to be super old, awesome dinosaurs, and we wanted them to each be really sweet. So we made, of course, Zatalpa in white, which we keep putting in commander decks, and Tetsamok and all these guys. But one of the things we were starting to experiment with in red was this, what we call bottling or Chandra, where you can exile cards and then cast them from exile. And we also knew that we needed commander cards as the format was growing and growing. So we came up with the idea of a big creature that could be your commander that bottled from the top of everyone's library and cast those cards. And this card was basically an immediate hit. Like we thought it would be a sweet commander card, and turns out the answer is just yes, it totally was. So really happy about this card. I know people keep getting on my case about this card and Zatalpa, how it keeps showing up in precons. And while I'm definitely aware, and I think about it consciously every time, this card just does what you want to do in Commander so often. It's a 6-mana, 6/6 creature that has to wait a turn, so it's fair. But the next turn when you attack, you get a huge bonus out of it. So it's a sweet mono red commander, and it is also a sweet card to put into your red deck. So you can expect to still see Atali and Zatalpa going forward. I'm a big fan of the card. Argothian Enchantress. There's a question about if this card was tested in Modern Horizons 2. This is a question I actually honestly don't know the answer. It might have been talked about, but Modern Horizons 2, I touched a few things in the set, but the high-profile reprints was not one of them. So this is one you got me on. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm sure they did look at it. There were enough green awesome enchantresses that, or Enchantress was a big enough of the setting that it makes sense that they would have looked at it. I think what probably happened is they came up with the green-white Enchantress, who I cannot remember the name of. One funny thing about working on Magic sets is the final names of cards often escape me. But I think it is... Oh no, this isn't going to work. I think it is this card. Yeah, Sithis, Harvest Hand. I think they came up with this card and were probably just like, okay, well, we're not going to put both this and Argothian Enchantress in the same set. This one's going to be a cool legend. So yeah, I think that's probably what happened there. Cool question. So, ultimatums. Let's take a look at Titanic Ultimatum. This is a good example. So the team was working on Alara block. It was the first ever 3-color set for Magic. It hadn't really been done beforehand. So they were trying to figure out if cool cycles they could do. Thank you for the follow, Wallam Automaton. They're trying to figure out things to do. And they came up with a number of cycles all across. And for some things, they dipped back into what already exists. For example, not Charm. Thank you, Acapella Fella. Great name, by the way. So they did a cycle of charms. Great. Charms make a lot of sense for what's going on here. Charms have existed in Magic for a long time. Doing 3-color charms, totally a fine thing to do. They did Mana Rocks with the Obelisk. Look like this. So a lot of cycles. But at Rare, what were they going to do? Well, they had an idea. They really wanted to reward you for playing 3 colors. Not just in a way where it was splashable, but in a way where you really had to go deep on making it. So they made these 7 mana, what we call them CCDDDFF cards, which is the very bad design terminology for they cost this mana cost. And they did really big splashy effects. Now, I gotta say the balance on these a little bit off. You've got Titanic Ultimatum, which is a fine card to finish in a Nigh deck maybe. Fine and limited, you're not gonna break anyone with it. You've got, on the other end of the spectrum, or we'll put Titanic in the middle. On the far left, we've got Cruel Ultimatum, which is ridiculous value. It's like a 13 for 1, which is pretty nutty. And then on the far other end of the spectrum, we have poor Clarion Ultimatum, which was basically unplayable. This card was good in like Momir Jora on Magic Online, and that was about it. So, which is like a wacky Magic format. So the original Ultimatums were all over the place, but they were cool and they were memorable. So let's fast forward. We're working many years later. I'm on the team, and we're working on Ikoria. And me and Dave Humphreys have this idea of, hey, we're doing a 3-color set again. What if we completed the other ultimatums? What if we did? Thank you, Moss Insomnia, for the follow. What if we completed? Oh my gosh! In the chat, you are my hero. Thank you so much to a certain random guy for all the cards we've done so far. Those are all the cards we've talked about already, and I can't believe it's been that many already. So thank you so much. So anyway, we're working on Ikoria, and we're in Ikoria. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do. And so the obvious thing to do is another cycle of ultimatums. But there was one thing we were a little worried about, which was the mana cost. A frustrating part about the original ultimatums was that even in a 3-color deck, even if you built your deck perfectly and you were only those 3 colors, even with the best of mana bases, sometimes you would still not draw the stuff to cast what you need. You know, I'm sure you encountered this in a Ikoria draft. Maybe you had the ultimatum and you just drew the wrong lands to cast it, which is always a bummer. So actually early on in Ikoria, when we were trying the ultimatums, I think they were like 4 colored mana, like white, black, black, green, and then 3 colorless, something like that. But ultimately we just decided, hey, we should lean into ultimatums all the way. And yeah, sometimes it's gonna be really frustrating when you don't draw your lands in the right order, but we wanted to match up to what was previous there. So that's how you got that cycle of ultimatums, a cycle, 10 years in the making or so. So there's a bit of a story for you there. Awesome. Okay, that's on the ultimatums. Hopefully that was to your liking. 8-Bit Shane, who I hope is still out there, asks about stories from Battle Bond. And maybe if you're not out there now, you can come back and watch later. Oh, hey, great, you're still there. So they were asking about Battle Bond, which is a set near and dear to my heart. Got my box right here. And they asked about the card Spellseeker, which is a great choice because I actually have quite a story about this card. And this is a story that many of you probably don't know. So I was working on Battle Bond, and the thing about the set is we basically had all of the draft environment was getting figured out. Like we kind of figured out how we were going to do it, how it was going to work, what the key things for the draft environment was going to be. But there was one thing that we're still kind of missing. So we knew how it was going to draft and that a lot of the commons and uncommons were good. But we knew that outside of Two-Headed Giant Limited, which you could only really draft, we needed to make sure there were enough exciting rares and mythics that players would also want to play these cards in other formats. It was really, in my mind, the set was you draft Two-Headed Giant, and then you take your favorite cards from the set and you go play them in Commander. That was my idea as design lead of the set. And so I was looking for things to do. And one of the things that I happened upon was cycles. And were there cycles we could complete? A great example of this is Brightling. This is part of the Morphling cycle, which I did a great video, a great Good Morning Magic episode about. You can go check out about super cycles. But this is completing like the 21-year-long, or was one of the pieces in completing the 21-year-long Morphling cycle. So I was looking for cycles, and I came up with the Morphling one. That was a suggestion from Rosewater, but I was looking for other ones. And there's a cycle that I was like, what if I continued on this? Because many years ago, in Portal 3 Kingdoms, of all sets, there was a card called Imperial Recruiter, which found a creature with power 2 or less. Okay, cool, great. Then, many years later, in Conspiracy 2, I was on the team working with Ben Hayes, and he came up with the idea of Recruiter of the Guard, which was a white creature that cost 3 mana. It was a 1/1, and it found a creature with toughness 2 or less. Cool. Well, I was working on Battle Bond, and I was thinking about cycles. And I thought, hey, what about another recruiter? What about a spell recruiter? So I came up with the idea of Spellseeker, and this is the blue one in the cycle. And my idea was that we would slowly cycle this one out over time. A fun piece of trivia about this card that I love is we couldn't get Recruiter in the name. It just didn't make sense, especially in the world of Kylum. But I still did petition, and Creative was on board with getting it into the flavor text. So you see the word recruited there in the flavor text. So will we ever get green and black versions of this? Well, in Commander Legends, I tried. I had one in the handoff when I handed the set off, but it did not make it all the way through development. My hope is someday we will. The question is which ones what they're gonna go find. But I hope someday we will. I've got some fun ideas, so someday we'll do it. A certain random guy, you are not random to me anymore. You are amazing in my heart. So thank you so much. All right, well now I don't have to just go scrolling up over and over again. Let's go to the Angry Red Bird. Arr. Hopefully you're still out there. You want to hear about Jodah, Archmage Eternal. Let me tell you some facts about Jodah. So Jodah, Archmage Eternal, shows up in Dominaria. Or does he? Well, yes, okay, he does show up in Dominaria. But a fun fact about Jodah is we saw him many years before in the Ice Age novels. That's right, Jodah is the protagonist of the Ice Age novels. Him and Jaya Ballard going around doing cool stuff. And so the thing about him is he drank from the Fountain of Youth. So he's actually alive forever. Back in the old days of Magic, immortality was just like handed out like candy. Like planeswalkers were immortal. Sure, Urza, you can live millennia. And oh, well, there's a fountain of youth you can go find and drink from that'll make you immortal. Great. So Jodah was immortal. But even after the mending happened in Time Spiral, Jodah retained his immortality. He wasn't a planeswalker. He's just a dude on Dominaria who has lived a very long time. And so when we were making the Dominaria set, we were like, huh, Jodah's still here. We should do a Jodah card finally. So we made this as a fun nod and a cool Wooburg style thing. As an Archmage Eternal, it just made a lot of sense to tap into all 5 colors of mana. So there's some fun facts about Jodah for you. I'm gonna go a little faster here because there's so many cards to get through. Let's go to KP539000. Hello, KP539000. We're gonna talk about Rexiel, the Risen Deep. So this card is a bit before my time, but there is a funny story associated with it. So Worldwake was lead designed by Ken Nagel. Now, Ken has been playing Commander for a long time. Long before there were Commander products, Ken was playing Commander. We released our first Commander set in 2011. This card's from 2010. Ken designed it before that, and so on. So Ken is the lead designer of Worldwake, and one of the things Ken likes to do is when he's trying to make a Magic card, often he'll go back and be like, you know what? What's a card I want for a deck that I have? And Ken had a blue-black Commander deck that he wanted to be helmed up by an awesome Sea Creature. It's kind of like an evil Sea Creatures deck. So he came up with Rexiel. And the rest is history. And to this day, it's still a card that shows up in Commander, so Ken totally nailed it. And while it might sound very self-serving to be like, wow, the dude just made a card for himself, I have learned, and when I came at Wizards, I was like, wow, people just do that? What I have learned over the course of working at Wizards, this is my 10th year there, is usually if there's something you want, there's a good chance that other people out there want it too. So with sometimes it makes sense to make a card for yourself because other people will also enjoy that card. So with Rexiel, the Risen Deep, Ken made it for himself, but a lot of players out there have really enjoyed it. So cool card to bring up. Okay, moving on. We are at Doomlord 5. You still there, Doomlord 5? Let's talk about Finale of Devastation. Now, Finale of Devastation. I think the question I saw you ask in chat is this a color pie break? And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'll say that when we were working on War of the Spark, we were looking for a cool mythic cycle to do, and a big cycle of X spells made a lot of sense. And so we based them around these kind of finale moments. It was the end of the storyline, so there were these really big things that happened. Now, I think that what you're asking about is it a color pie break because it gets cards back from the graveyard? That's going to be my guess. Or maybe it's because it's granting all your creatures haste. One of those two things. You can let me know which it is in the chat. But green can get things out of graveyards. It's got Recollect. It's got Regrowth. So taking something out of a graveyard is not really that far beyond the pale for green. I know we worked on this card for a while. There were a lot of tweaks made to it. Yeah, so Guard to the Battlefield is cheating out a step, right? Normally green puts something in your hand and then onto the battlefield. It was deemed acceptable for this card. I wasn't part of the discussions around why that happened, but I think the argument, if I were talking about green color pie, the argument was probably it can return to your hand. It should be able to do this. I will note that as many people out there have noted, green has gotten a lot of things in the past few years, and white, of course, has needed some help. So we've been doing a lot recently to make sure we take a really close look at cards for color pie before they go out the door. This is a card that might have gotten tweaked if we made it today to not do that. It might have had a little more consternation put on it. At the time, it got through probably on just, it's close enough to Regrowth. We're going to make it happen. So that's the story there. All right, going up to my list here, we're going to look at Tom Which One Soul Separator. I think that's this is your card. So here's a fun story. So I feel like I keep saying here's a fun story, but it's just because Magic has so many fun stories. So here we are, Soul Separator. we're working on Shadows over Innistrad block, and there is a hole in the set. This happens quite often, kind of midway through the process. A bunch of rares will get killed, or we won't have things that we like, and we'll go into a process called hole filling. Now, hole filling is where anyone, anywhere in the company can submit an idea for a card. And Ali Medwin, Ali Steele now, had a great idea for a hole and sent it in to fill us the slot in Eldritch Moon. And it was Soul Separator. And it was straight from her head into the set. I think there were maybe a couple tweaks made to it, but the idea of you exile one creature card and you get the body of one and the spirit of another persisted all the way through. I think it's just such a great flavor slam dunk. And yeah, I mean, this was totally came from someone outside of the design team. One of the cool things about working at Wizards that I really appreciate is no matter where you are in the company, you could be, you know, working in IT or in communications or even on D&D, something entirely different. You have a chance to impact Magic. And we have things like the Mythic Wall I discussed earlier. We have things like hole filling, where you can submit card ideas. So this came from Ali, who is unfortunately no longer at Wizards, but was then on the Magic Online team and went right into the set, which I think is pretty cool. All right, moving on. We're going to go to Dr. Unks, who's asking about Blim Comedic Genius. Let's talk about Blim. So, Blim Comedic Genius. This one can be summed up in basically two words. Evil Zedru. There was an idea about... Zedru's a really fun commander. I think a lot of folks like Zedru. Here it is if you're not familiar. Looks like this right here. Gives your opponent stuff and you get a bonus for it. And there was an idea about what if we did a evil one. Black and red also have a history of playing enchantments that have debatably good effects and creatures that have downsides. What if you could give them away to other people? And that's where Blim came from. What was kind of that genesis. I think Ken Nagel came up with the idea of Blim. So once again, great work to Ken for this one. It does something that's a little iffy. We decided was okay, which is black giving away its own enchantments. Typically, we're very careful about black and red being able to push away their enchantments to getting rid of their enchantments. But we finally started to let up on that a little bit. We've got cards like Feed the Swarm now, which let black deal with enchantments. So we thought giving it away to an opponent was a fair way to do it. And, you know, you can always give them like one of my favorites, a Demonic Pact, which is just a good time. Give them Demonic Pact with the you lose the game mode ready to go. I don't know. I see a Critimas. I don't know how long I'm going to keep doing this, but I'm having a really fun time. So I don't know. I'm just going to keep going until I feel like I'm out of energy. And it takes a while to wear me out. So let's find out. All right, here we go. Going over to the Skyrog with the powerful, the all-strong, the amazing Goblin Snowman. Who could resist the might of Goblin Snowman? All right, so it's Ice Age. The team's coming up with goofy tropes, things to do, and this is what they came up with. I don't have any stories from the Ice Age version of this card. It is, you know, it's way before my time. I was like 5 years old when the set came out. But what I can tell you a bit more about is this version of the card, which is the Time Spiral version. So Time Spiral had a time-shifted sheet of 121 cards that were being reprinted into the set from Magic's past. Now, it wasn't just the strongest cards ever on a list. Aaron Forsythe picked the cards on the sheet, and he wanted to make sure they were cards that were memorable or would elicit a what from someone, or you know, just would make you feel something. And so he grabbed cards from all throughout Magic, you know, from many different eras, with the idea that no matter who you were and when you started playing, well, hey, there's a card on this sheet for you. And one of those cards Aaron put on there was Goblin Snowman. It's just a goofy, charming card from Ice Age that we would not make today, either both conceptually and in mechanics. That's how it ended up on the Time Spiral bonus sheet, and it makes me smile. I keep saying, I'll tell you what though. Here's what I keep saying. I want to do Battle Bond 2. I don't know if there are any Battle Bond fans out there in the chat. If so, you can let me know. I want to do Battle Bond 2. I want to do it so badly, and what I keep pitching people on is when we do Battle Bond 2, we'll do Battle Bond 2 Winter Sports, and it'll be like the Olympic Games, right? Where we had the spring sports before, and now we have the Winter Games. And when we do that, maybe it's time for Goblin Snowman, and of course, who could forget Goblin Ski Patrol? Who could forget this winner right here? Goblin Ski Patrol to make a comeback. So maybe someday we'll make that happen. Okay. Next up, we have Looking Up and Down, which I will do. Look up, look down. Are you out there? Asking about Wingmate Rock or Twisted Reflection. Let's talk about Wingmate Rock. I just want to take a moment to say I've been streaming for about an hour now. There's like 50 of you. Oops, not that card. That's the wrong card. There's like 50 of you out there, 53 of you out there watching. I'm blown away. Thank you so much for spending the time with me and just hanging out, chatting. It's awesome. So everyone who's been following, super appreciate it. It really means a lot. I think there's been a couple subs too, so which is not something I expected at all. I didn't really have any plans tonight, and I was like, hey, I could finally do this thing I've thought about for a while, and I'm really glad you're all enjoying it. Okay, with that said, let's talk about Wingmate Rock. So, Wingmate Rock. This showed up in Khans of Tarkir, which had the debut of the raid mechanic. This had a fun, thank you for the follow, Kerfluffles. This had a really fun playtest name, and I cannot remember what it was. I think what it was like called Buddy Bird, something like that. I cannot remember. But anyway, Wingmate Rock was totally, had a really fun playtest name. And let's see, when we were working on it, there was a time where it created a token copy of itself, not literally, otherwise that would go infinite, but the token copy also had gain 1 life when it attacks. But for power level, it ultimately got stripped from the card. And it turns out the card was still quite strong. It showed up in Standard, it was a bomb in Limited. Yeah, it was fun trying to come up with a big raid reward. We knew we wanted Mardu to have a mythic level raid card, and trying to find what that was a bit of a trick, and turns out that just two creatures at the same time. Oh, I remember what it was. I remember the name of this card. It was Broodmate Rock, because it was modeled after Broodmate Dragon, which creates a 4/4 version of a dragon when it comes into play. This was modeled after that. So this was Broodmate Bird or Broodmate Rock, one of the two. I can't remember, but that's the fun story there. Thank you for asking about Wingmate Rock. Blind Guardian 98. Let's talk about Scapeshift. Boom. Here is Scapeshift right here. Okay, so Scapeshift. This card showed up in Morningtide. Now, when this card showed up, it was junk. You wouldn't believe it, people, but it was just, now it's such a known card. At the time, it was just like, okay, funny, goofy card, whatever, throw it over your shoulder. Don't think about it too much. And then a little something happened. Valakut came out. And immediately the face of this card was changed forever. It skyrocketed in popularity overnight as people were building their decks. Now, people try to do things with Scapeshift, they try to do fun little goofy combos before then. But once Valakut got released, which I'm sure many of you know, but if you don't know the trick, basically you cast Scapeshift, you go get a Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle, and 6 other mountains. They all come into play. You deal 18 to your opponent's face, or if you have enough lands, you get 2 Valakuts and a bunch of mountains, because they all see each other at the same exact time. It's a 1-card combo, basically. So Scapeshift, it blew up, basically, when that happened. So one of the fun things about it, I think, is it's the kind of card that is very good in a specific combo, but not really good outside of that. So when we were making M19, we were looking for awesome reprints to put in the set, and we realized the card we could put in here was Scapeshift, because players would be very excited to own it for modern reasons, but in Standard it wasn't really going to do too much, so it was pretty safe to print, and that's how it came to be. Now, it turns out it actually did end up getting played, I think with Field of the Dead, which is its own story, but when it hit in 2019, it wasn't played right away. Anyway, Let's see. One of the story I wanted to tell. My friend John Laux did top 8 a PTQ with a really sweet deck that did not use Valakut and use Scapeshift. I loved it. It was this red, green, white zoo aggro deck, and you would play a plated GOP. It was an extended, okay, so it was pretty powerful at the time. You would play plated GOP, and you would play Step Links, and then your opponent would be like, doing my thing, whatever, and then you would just cast Scapeshift, sack all your lands, including maybe a Flagstones of Trocare, which is a land that gets another land when it dies, and then you would kill your opponent out of nowhere in your zoo deck, which was really really fun. Okay, yes, I got you a random guy. Once we get, how about if you could just keep the list handy, and once we get through maybe about half of these, you can repost it, or maybe a quarter or so of these, you can repost it. Okay, moving on, let's talk about Massacre Girl. So here's a fun story about Massacre Girl. So Massacre Girl was originally, the character name was originally in, any guesses? Dragon's Maze. It was in Dragon's Maze as a key character. It was a character that existed at that point, and it was going to go in the set. And the card that was made for Massacre Girl was Exava, or excuse me, not Exava. It was this one. It was Master of Cruelties from Dragon's Maze. This was originally Massacre Girl. Now, we realized kind of late on, one, the flavor didn't make a ton of sense, and two, it actually didn't work for being legendary. Massacre Girl is a legendary character. So we turned it into a non-legendary version, gave it different art, of course, and it all worked out. But when we came back around to War of the Spark, there's a war going on. Massacre Girl, yeah, she's doing what she does best, massacring. So we made this card, which I think is awesome design, because a lot of the times it is a wrath and will wrath everything, but you always got to think about it a little bit, which is a lot of fun. So hopefully you enjoyed that little look at that. All right, let's see here. A lot of cards to get through, so I'm going to keep going. Looks like next up we have, oh yeah, here's quite a card. Dockside Extortionist. I think we would do this one differently if we could do it again today. So here's Dockside Extortionist. So Glenn Jones is working on Commander 2019, and we, red and white, we knew both needed help. What? Voxy? Holy smoke! 629 people? Are you serious? Are you serious right now? No way. Voxy, if you are still here, I would love to give you one of these, take you to the top of the list for your raid. I think it's only fair. Voxy, do you have a favorite card or card you wanna know about to put in here? And I will put you right to the top of the list. I bet there's a favorite of yours somewhere out there. It's been a blast, man. I've never really done the streaming thing before, but it's been an hour 20 minutes and I barely feel it. This is so much fun. I can see why everyone does this. This is gonna be like a one-time Thursday deal, but now I'm like, maybe I should do this again sometime. If you're just joining too, if you want to be notified when I go live in the future, please go ahead and follow, and or if you're really kind, subscribe. But I don't expect that. Let's see. Oh, how much do I want to remove all mill from Voxy? Okay, so Voxy, you hate mill. That's the deal, huh? Well, let me tell you about one of my favorite anti-mill cards, Elixir of Immortality. So mill is pretty generally hated by a lot of people. A lot of people do not like mill. It feels horrible when it happens to you. Thank you to everyone who's following. There's so many people following. I can't even list all your names. But know that it means a ton. So people hate mill. And it turns out Voxy is not alone. So when we were making Magic 2011, we thought it would be great to put in the core set, which a lot of newer players would be picking up, a great answer to mill decks. And Elixir of Immortality is the card that they came up with. This card is a fan favorite because you reload your entire graveyard into your library. Which means that it gets really hard to get milled out. Now, they could mill away your elixirs, that's true, but if you're playing 2 or 3 of them, it's pretty hard for that to happen. And as long as you draw 1, when you reload your graveyard back into your library, you'll get all of your elixirs back. So this is kind of a fan favorite card that a lot of players like. I always feel like Elixir of Immortality is a very like how to keep an idiot busy card. Not saying anyone out there plays it as an idiot, but just like if what you want to do is sit there in the game and just like take forever and go through your deck over and over, it's exactly what you can do. It's a way to keep doing nothing basically. So I think so we reprinted it a lot of times. It was an M11, it was an M12, it was an M13, it was an M14. But then it all came to a head when there was a standard deck that had Elixir of Immortality as its win condition, where literally it was a powerful and popular deck that won the game by milling its opponents out, doing the exact thing it was built to prevent, by the way, by making the game take forever. And it was at that point that it was realized, yeah, maybe this isn't the best thing to have in standard forever, if this deck is going to exist, and it was taken out of the core set. So that's why it went away, but Voxy, we will keep making plenty of anti-mill answers for you. So hopefully you enjoyed that fun little story about Elixir of Immortality, and may you not get milled out anytime soon. Okay, tons of cards here. I gotta go back to my list. There's so many cards on this list now. Time to start going through them, and I'll try and go a little quicker to get to everyone. So, what I was about to talk about when Voxy showed up is a pretty big one. That is Dockside Extortionist. So, Dockside Extortionist. This is a powerful magic card. When we were working on Commander 2019, Glenn Jones was the lead, and we knew both white and red needed help. There were both colors that needed the assistance. White, you're going to finally start seeing a bunch of the tools show up for over the next couple of years. I made a bunch of YouTube videos about this. Red is finally in a much better spot, partially on the back of cards like this. We made a bunch of cards to help out red, and there were some really good ones that turned out well for us, I think, like Atali. Atali's a great one. 6 mana, have to wait a turn, but when it hits, it hits. Dockside Extortionist is one that we would do differently if we could do it again, I'm pretty sure, because it just generates too much treasure. You know, it is essentially a 2 mana ritual for 6+ mana. You can easily get 20 mana in the mid to late game on this card. And it also sticks around forever, right? So a bunch of really ridiculous things happen because of this card. The thing about the card is its heart is in the right place. Its heart is so noble and pure and like, hey, we're going to help red out by giving you the mana you need to cast your spells, but it was a little too much, I think, in retrospect. If we could do this card again, I think we would probably just have it target an opponent. That way, you know, you're playing a commander game, you pick the player with the most artifacts, you get 4 or 5 mana out of it. It's a lot more reasonable, and you can still blink it with shenanigans, as opposed to now where you can make 20 mana off of it and go infinite with blink effects. A lot of ways to do that. We would probably curb it so you couldn't, maybe if it was from your hand. So we would do this again if we could do it, if we could print it again, but we can't. That's not how Magic works. And I don't think the RC, well, I don't know for sure. I'm not on the rules committee or the CAG, but I don't think the RC has plans to hit this card anytime soon. It is nice, though, for red to have a marquee card, right? A card you can point to and say, that's awesome. And hopes in the not too distant future we'll have plenty there for white as well. Okay. More cards. Tom W. Twitch is asking about, here's what I'm going to do. I hate to break up the list, but if it's okay with some of you folks out there who have multiple cards in the queue, I'm going to try and hit people who haven't got a card talked about yet, and then I'll come back to people who are on their second time through, just so I can try and hit everybody, especially with the raid. There's, I'm sure, going to be so many more requests that I want to try and get through everyone at least once. So I'll get there. I promise. Stick around. I'll make sure that I do not leave without addressing your card. Let me try and get to people I have not done yet. So, looking up next, I think the first person we haven't hit up yet is Decidedly Ugin, who wants to know about Sylvan Primordial. Enot Sola is asking, how old can you go for cards? So I started working at Wizards. The first set I worked on was Return to Ravnica. So anything from after that, I can tell design stories about. Anything from before that, though, I may still know stories because I heard them at some point or another. Or I might just have fun play stories I can tell you. So I'll leave that up to you. Okay, decidedly Ugin, Sylvan Primordial. This is a card that I designed. So you're welcome, or I'm sorry, depending on how you feel about it. And it came from a design trap. NSPP19. Yes, if you just joined, the way it works is say a card, it'll get on the list, and I will get to talking about the card in a little bit. So I've got a long list to get through. I'm trying to get through all of them, and it'll make it happen. Hello, Matt. Hello, Watsy Matt. Great to have you here. Thanks for coming by the stream. Matt, if you have a card you'd love to know about, you're welcome to talk about it. So, or to post about it in the chat. So, Sylvan Primordial. Let's chat Sylvan Primordial. So we're working on Gatecrash, and we're looking through what's in the set, and we're like, hey, what's missing is some stuff for multiplayer. And at the time, Commander was kind of just growing, right? We just launched the first Commander decks the year prior. Matt, you can talk about unreleased cards, and I'm sure everyone will love you. However, I put, by joining the chat, you've signed a contract to take all ownership of anything you say. So I will leave that on you. Like, subscribe, smash that free Twitch Prime button, Matt, whatever sounds good to you. Anyway, so we're working on Sylvan Primordial, or working on the set, and we have holes in the set for like a big multiplayer cycle. And I had an idea about what if we did something to impact each other opponent, and we made a big cycle of creatures that did that. And so the Primordials were my idea and my suggestion. I designed 4 of the 5 Primordials. The one that I did not create was a Luminet Primordial. Luminet Primordial, originally what it did is it got you an equipment for every one of your opponents and then attached it to a creature you controlled. But what we realized as we were working on the cycle is it was the one in the cycle that broke the trend. All the other ones do mean things to your opponents, right? You take a creature out of their graveyard, you cast a spell out of their graveyard. It was weird that this one only did a beneficial thing for you. So it was switched to Swords to Plowsharing each of your opponent's creatures. With Sylvan Primordial, I thought this was going to be one of the weaker ones, and turns out that was not true. It ended up getting banned in Commander and was my first ever banned card, which I think I've got maybe 7 cards I made or so now that are banned, or at least cards that I touched somewhere that got banned somewhere along the line, which, not exactly a stat I'm proud of. Although to be fair, a lot of them were in early design, and what made them broken was in development. But one of the traps I think this cycle fell into was designing cards that were supposed to have a huge impact in Commander when they came down and affect each opponent, which is something we try not to do as much of these days because the Primordials were just like so obvious, like, yeah, you play this, it has a huge impact on the game, everyone kind of hates you for it. And basically, the blue, black, and green, while it was legal Primordials, have seen a ton of play in Commander ever since. So there's the Primordial story for you. Thank you so much, Decidedly Ugin. Much appreciated. All right, I'm going to keep going to people who I don't think have done it. Sandkeeper21, have I done you already? I can't remember. I guess I'll take you because I don't want to skip you. So we're going to talk about Lich. Lich appears all the way back in the beginning of Magic. And Richard Garfield was working on Magic, and he had this idea for a popular trope, the Lich, right? And a Lich, of course, in fantasy is when you put all of your life into something, into a phylactery, and then that thing's what keeps you alive, even in undeath. So it made sense mechanically that when the Lich went away, you would lose the game. The fun thing about Lich, the story that I really appreciate, is this card has inspired many other cards throughout Magic's history. So Richard Garfield made this card back in Alpha. It inspired a few other cards, but then on Dominaria, when I was working on Dominaria, I had the immense pleasure of working with Richard Garfield on the set, and he actually came into the office and worked with us. And the coolest thing I got to do, I think, one of the coolest things I've maybe ever gotten to do at Wizards, in fact, was be the file keeper for Dominaria. And what that meant is I put all the cards into the file when they were sent to me. So Richard Garfield would send me all of his raw designs, and I would put them into the set, or the ones that were chosen to go into the set. And it was really fun to get his emails because a lot of them were templated like cards from 1993, right? They'd be like tap, written out like TAP, to destroy green creature, effects that prevent destruction cannot be used to redirect this or whatever. Right, and we're working on Dominaria, and Richard is sending me messages like this, so it was fun to always see how he typed them out in a Magic Ease. But a brilliant designer. Anyway, one of the cards he sent me, though, was a Lich variant, and that ended up going right into the set as Lich's Mastery, which is a throwback to Lich. So it's kind of cool that Richard Garfield, the designer of Magic, made this thing back in Alpha, and then all these years later made another version of it all the way in Dominaria. So really, really, really cool. Okay, Dust Elemental. Quick story about Dust Elemental. So this is part of a vertical cycle, what we call a vertical cycle. So a vertical cycle, to back up, a horizontal cycle is when every color gets something, right? We do a white one, a blue one, a black one, a red one, and a green one. To Asker Dankenwinker in the chat, WotC Matt is Matt Tabak, who's an amazing co-worker, works on Wizards on editing, former rules manager, and has made many a Magic card as well. He's also extremely tall, so he's great. Okay, so anyway, a horizontal cycle is what we normally do, when we make one for every color, right? A vertical cycle is when we do it all in the same color, but it's common, uncommon, and rare, and sometimes mythic rare. So in Time Spiral, we had White Mane Lion as the common. Fun little common here from Time Spiral, which returned one creature to your hand. At uncommon, we had Stormfront Rider, excuse me, not Stormfront Pegasus. We had Stormfront Riders, which comes into play and returns 2 creatures from your hand, as well as Stonecloaker. Time Spiral was weird. I don't know why this card also got in here. There's a lot of stuff with Time Spiral where I start to explain it, and then someone's like, what about this other thing from Time Spiral? And I'm like, dude, I don't know, it was Time Spiral. But anyway, we came up with it with Stonecloaker. And then, so the important part is at common we had White Mane Lion, then there were Stormfront Riders, and then at rare we had Dust Elemental, which returned 3 creatures to your hand. So it's a vertical cycle all the way up. This is a really goofy card in that it is a white card with fear. Planar Chaos, Time Spiral. That's all I have to say about that. So there's a fun story for you about Dust Elemental. We would, of course, we don't put fear on cards anymore at all, but we would not make a white card with fear normally. Especially flying in fear? Like, what's up with that? What's up with that? I don't know. Okay, there's a story for you about Dust Elemental. Hosh25 wants to learn about Kathis. So, Core Set 2020. We decided Yanni Skolnick was the lead designer of Core Set 2020. And one thing Yanni thought would be pretty cool is to do a cycle of Wedge Legends. So we got some pretty memorable ones. We, of course, got Omnath here, Locus of the Royal. We got whatever, Kaikar, that's his name. We got Kaikar here, which was pretty cool. And then, yeah, we also got this guy, Kathis, the Hidden Hand. Now, these were built for Commander play. The idea being that, I mean, some of them standard for sure, but could see standard play, but really it was supposed to be a high-level profile cycle of Mythics that would be enticing, at least, for Commander. And so, with Kathis, the idea was, nowadays when we build Commander, cards for Commander, we try to figure out what the hook for them is going to be. What is the interesting thing that this card is doing? What deck will you build out of it? And the idea with Kathis was, well, what if we made a Legendary Matters commander? And this could be your commander, and you could cast spells that were legendary and have a cost reduction, and then you could recast them from your graveyard. So this was built as like a cool legendary commander. I believe that's what Yanni was doing. As it turns out, it did expand its reach a little bit more, and in one of the wackier combo decks I've ever seen, there was a Kathis combo deck in Standard that involved using Kathis and Mox Opal, and this card that had historic Mill Yourself for some cards that like go off and basically go through your entire deck, which was not really anticipated out of the card. But I love weird wonky combo decks, so that scratched my itch. And Kathis still shows up as a cool Abzan commander. As we do more and more with Commander, we're trying to find different and unique places to dive into our deck building options. So Kathis is kind of where that came from. Trekker 13. Let's talk about Abashin, who is a Cephalid. I mean, it's not, first of all, beyond just being an emperor of Cephalids, this is a Cephalid. Yeah, Bastion in the chat notes the combo there. Thank you again to a certain random guy for maintaining this list. You have been a true champion here. So, Abashin Cephalid Emperor. So, in Odyssey, we are just coming off of the Apocalypse storyline, the Invasion storyline. And what was going on was we basically blew up Dominaria in a sense, right? There was this huge war. It all got messed up. Everything was horrible. And story-wise, it was like, well, let's not go back there. We just had a war. Where could we go else? And a funny thing about Magic back then is you would think in a game that's all about planes and planeswalking, we would go to different worlds all the time. But no, as it turns out, for a very long time, we just kept setting the majority of sets on Dominaria. So we had just finished Invasion, and the team was like, okay, yeah, we're done with that side of Dominaria. What about a different continent on Dominaria? Could we just go somewhere else on this plane? And so they invented the continent of Otaria, which is where the entire Odyssey story takes place. And so Otaria is not so much touched by the invasion and the effects of what was going on there. And there was a bunch of stuff there that we had never seen. And one of them were the Cephalids, these seafaring creatures, right? We weren't going to do merfolk here because we were being brave and different, I guess. So we did Cephalids again, who have not really been seen much ever since. Maybe someday we'll see them again. Who knows? And Abashin was the emperor of them all. Of course, Lawan, noted sideboard card off Aether Vial, is the empress of the Cephalids. Let's not forget about Lawan. But Abashin is the emperor. This is a card to me which I don't think we would make today because it is totally miserable. It's a 6-mana 3/3. Sure, whatever, that's cool. That can just tap all creatures without flying forever. So if your opponent doesn't have flyers, they are never attacking. It's like a Dawnglare Invoker every turn for 3 mana. And then on top of the ability to tap all creatures without flying, for some reason, it's also opposition. It just has the same ability twice in a weird way. So yeah, I don't think we would make this one anymore. Kind of a wonky artifact of Odyssey. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Magic Untapped. Plane Shift and Apocalypse take place on Dominaria and Phyrexian. It's true. We do see other planes, and Nemesis is on Wrath and so on. But the majority of Magic sets, for some reason, were just on Dominaria, despite being a game all about planeswalking. It's like in Doctor Who, how they just are always hanging out on Earth. Weird, right? Glitchy Stitch, yes, there will be a VOD. I'll probably just leave it up as a VOD on Twitch, and I'll also put it up on YouTube, maybe? People seem to really be enjoying this, so who knows? We'll see if I say anything that I shouldn't say, but provided that I keep it clean, I will leave this up. Okay, keeping rolling, going on to, and that was a Trekker 13 with Abashin, so thank you so much. Going on to Crimidius with Godo, Bandit Warlord. So, Samurai, am I right? I love Samurai. Big fan. As you know, if you were here earlier in the stream, I am a gigantic Kamigawa fan. Carolurf, I see your question there. At some point, I will try and get to questions. Right now, I'm trying to get through this list of cards, but maybe if we get through the cards, I'll just hang out and tell some stories or something. We'll see. All right, go to Bandit Warlord. So this is a samurai lord, but the sad part, the heartbreaking part about this card to me is that it is mono red. This is before Commander was really a thing, at least on a widespread axis. So the idea of making a card that could helm your Commander deck didn't really exist. So it is unfortunately the mono red lord for Samurai when red-white is the thing that needed the Samurai Lord the most. And I tried to make a Samurai Lord, by the way. In Commander Legends, I made a card called Mother's Yamazaki, which was really fun. You can find it in a Good Morning Magic video. It is a creature that you could have it had partner, and you could have 2 copies of Mother Yamazaki if they both had partner, which is pretty fun. But anyway, I digress. Someday we'll get our Samurai Lord, but for now we have Godo. So the thing to do with Godo is at the time when Kamigawa came out was grab Tatsumasa. Believe it or not, that was like the best thing you could find was this card, Tatsumasa the Dragon's Fang. and you would play Godo and get Tatsumasa. And at this point in Kamigawa, it was like hard to lose, right? You have a 5/5 +5/+5 on Godo. You could exile Tatsumasa and get a dragon. This was the hot combo of the day, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it was a different time back then. The thing that we would do differently today if we were making this card would not let it continually attack over and over. It would say if it attacks during your first attack step, because it is just too easy to, it does say that, but we would probably word it in a way, basically what I'm getting at is we would try and make it so it doesn't go infinite with Helm of the Host, which is the big problem here. Helm of the Host is the card you get now, and frankly, I'm pretty tired of getting Helm of the Hosted in Commander. So, I don't know, I would probably be like, Matt Tabak, you figure it out. You figure out how this doesn't go infinite with Helm of the Host. You would probably do something like Port Razor, where you can't attack a player already attacked this turn, maybe, right? So you can't go infinite there. Would find some goofy way like this to make it happen. But there's fun facts about Godo. Still a cool card to play to this day, though. Just if you get Helm of the Host against me, I'm gonna roll my eyes. That's just how it works. WotC Matt with the great solve of raising its cost by 2. That could also be an option. Okay, moving on. Tom W. Twitch 1, I will come back to you. I see you have Lonus Zoologist there. I'll come back to you at some point. Looks like you have a number of cards, Virtus and Gorm and Humble Defector. I will try and get back to them. I want to get to the people who have not asked a question first. I believe, despite all the amazing work he has done in the chat, which once again, big props, a certain random guy has not asked about a card yet. So I'm going to take Villus, Broker of Blood. Villus, Broker of Blood coming in hot here. So let's talk about Villus. So, if you give me just one moment here. Where are you? There it is, Villus, Broker of Blood. So, Villus, Broker of Blood, working on M20. One of the things about M20, we just talked about how it had a bunch of legends, right? There's a lot of legends in M20. We're really starting to see that Commander is huge. Well, another thing that we wanted to do was make some monocolor legends. Now, monocolor legends are really hard to make strong enough that you would want to build an entire Commander deck around them. So by making a really splashy build around effect that's quite powerful, it can get people very excited about it. Villus is an 8-mana card, but man, is it a powerful commander when it comes down. The ability to translate life directly into cards is huge. The way I see this most often played, I think, is with Carrick, where you can, and I'll bring that up if you don't know what this card does, where you can pay black as Phyrexian mana. So you basically pay a black and draw 4 cards off of it, which is a pretty strong interaction. So yeah, we designed it basically to be targeted for Commander and to make some top-end swingy Commander plays, and it's definitely shown up in that sense. I think it's done some pretty fun things. I don't have a ton of stories about this one in particular, other than it's a big demon and has a fun effect. So that's Villus, Broker of Blood. Thank you for following, number 71143. Yeah, I to be fair, Mox number 26, I just literally went to my Good Morning Magic folder, selected half the documents and hit delete, and hopefully there's nothing important in there. I don't know. I'll find out later. And hopefully I just get enough room to keep recording this VOD, because I think people are going to want to watch this later on. Okay, moving on to Emmanuelona with Figure of Destiny. This is a fun one. Are you, Emmanuel, are you the Kithkin fan? I think you're the Kithkin fan, right? There's a Kithkin guy who I love. We chat on Twitter sometimes. Big fan of Kithkin. Someday we'll get more Kithkin out to you. I believe in it. Let's talk about Figure of Destiny. So this card came out in Eventide and was a huge deal at the time. This was actually the pre-release card. At the time, there was just one pre-release card. Everyone got it. We moved away from that since, but Figure of Destiny was that card for Eventide. And it created an entirely new model of card. This kind of leveling up card, where it started off as one thing and then would eventually become these other things, a 2/2 and then a 4/4 and then an 8/8. Now it's written out kind of clunkily here, but this individual card was extremely popular. It not only showed up competitively, but it also really inspired designers too. And it was this card, Figure of Destiny, that inspired the level up mechanic, which we see in Rise of the Eldrazi. So that's pretty cool. That inspired that whole thing. It also inspired a bunch of other cards, such as First Tree. What is that card from this guy? Warden of the First Tree. When we were working on Fate Reforged, we were like, oh, what would be really fun? Well, let's do a version of this that is wedged instead of 2-color. That was pretty cool. When we were working on Kaladesh, or excuse me, on Kaldheim, we were like, oh, what if we did a snow version of it? And I think this is the card. Yeah, here it is, Ascendant Spirit, which just came out in Kaldheim. So it's a really fun model. We've learned that players kind of love this slowly level up pattern, and I think you'll see more cards like this in the future, and it's all because of Figure of Destiny. So big shout out to Figure of Destiny for making this happen, and hopefully we see more like this in the future. Okay, moving on to Fishgum, who asks about Prince of Thralls. This is a card, yeah, this is the card I was thinking of. So here's a card from Shards of Alara. Now, Shards of Alara is kind of a funny set because it has 3-color cards, and it has some 3-color big splashy cards, but it sort of predates Commander, not as a format, but in terms of popularity, like Commander becoming a big thing. It promotes that. Hey, Magic Untapped, Barry, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate you hanging out for almost 2 hours, so thank you for coming out. And watching. And to everyone out there, this is amazing. I did not imagine I would have 300 people 2 hours in watching me talk about history of and design stories of various Magic cards. So it's amazing to have you here. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe or follow, and I will maybe I'll do more like it in the future. This is going pretty well. So let's talk about Prince of Thralls. So Shards of Alara kind of predates Commander in a lot of ways. It has these big splashy expensive cards though, which are pretty cool. And this is a really cool design, I think, because it's something that feels like it's all 3 colors that happens in just one line of rules text. And I know Matt Tabak is always a big fan of these, and we can do things elegantly and short. Because it's hard to find something that is 3 colors and just one line of rules text. And Prince of Thralls nails it. It steals your opponent's stuff. It makes your opponent make a hard choice. It deals some damage, and all of those things are pretty cool. So, this sees some Commander play, not a ton, but a little bit. And I think this card is always a good deal of fun when it comes out. It's just a big smashy demon, which is fun. That makes your opponent make a choice. This kind of card paved the way for a lot of other effects like it, by the way. Like for example, Athreos, right here, who forces your opponent into a tough payment situation. So it really did pave the way for a lot of things that are doing. Oh, so Matt Tabak is sharing some stories in chat here. Mark Gottlieb notes on 325 of some year that there's an infinite loop if your opponent plays a Gather Specimens and has a 0 toughness creature. So that's pretty funny. Thank you, Matt. Pay attention to the chat. Matt's sharing some fun stories about these cards too. Matt Tabak, of course, my coworker, all around great guy. So go do that. Go appreciate the wonder that is Matt Tabak. Okay, moving on from Prince of Thralls, we're going to talk about Book of Exalted Deeds. This is a brand new card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. I'm stoked to be talking about it. So the deal with the Book of Exalted Deeds is, this is, I believe, something from Dungeons & Dragons. It's a mirror to the Book of Vile Darkness, which is another card in the set that summons Vecna. Design-wise, well, I'm sure you've all noticed, especially after it was banned in Standard 2022 yesterday, that this is a combo with creature lands. You can put this on a Faceless Haven, and it has a counter that says you can't win, or they can't win and you can't lose, which caused some problems, so the card got banned. Ever since this card came out, we heard about this combo, there's been some internal discussion around, like, should cards like this say that you can win under no conditions or lose under no conditions? Should we try you can't get decked? Maybe something like that. Who knows what we'll do in the future, because the arena play pattern of we both have this in play, we both have no cards in our library, we're just passing back and forth and seeing who blinks first is not the most fun thing out there. But as far as how this card was created, I think Jules made this as a pretty top-down Book of Exalted Deeds from D&D. It makes you immortal at some point, it makes angels. It's really flavorful. Because normally I have a pretty good grasp on card stories, but I wasn't on the team for Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, and some of the development of the set happened while the pandemic was occurring. So I don't know as much trivia about these cards yet. I need to take a good multiverse dive on it. But I know that Jules really trying to make a top-down version of this. And yeah. Okay, let's see here. Moving on to Flumph. Everyone wants to know about Flumph. Are there still people out there who want to know about Flumph? All that's on here, written by a certain random guy who's been keeping track of this all in chat, is so many people want to know about Flumph. So if you're still in there in the chat and you want to know about Flumph, let me know who you are. Make yourself loud. Let's talk about Flumph, though. So one of the things we've been working on a lot is how can we get white card draw out there. We know white needs some form of white card draw. Yeah, people, apparently Voxy streamers love Flumph. That's what I've learned. I don't know the reference. I'll have to talk with Voxy about it. But who doesn't love a Flumph, right? Flumph's great. So Flumphs are hang out in dungeons, and unlike most monsters, actually help out adventurers, which is kind of a fun fact about this card. Anyway, so we know white needs card draw for commander. It still should be the worst at card drawing, but as we joked about, or not joked about, it's not a joke, but as we've talked about internally, it was kind of the 6th worst card drawing color, right? It was almost behind colorless in some sense. So how can we give white some tools and give it white ways of drawing cards? And R.A. Nie has been doing a really great job leading the charge on this, but the entire design group has been working on it, and I've made a couple of great Good Morning Magic videos where I've talked about what we're doing in the color. So with Flumph in particular, one of the things white can do is I get a card and you get a card. So this is a really fun card to slam down, and then in multiplayer it's very political. Hey, you attack me, and then I'll block with Flumph, and I'll draw a card and you'll draw a card. And in aggregate, the white player could draw 3 cards in a round, right? Because each player attacks me, I block, and I draw a card for each of them, while each other player is only drawing 1 card. So that's a pretty cool thing we're trying to do, and we're investigating new ways. I know that Secret Rendezvous was not to everyone's taste, but this is just one version of this effect this could take. We can see things more like Flumph. I've heard a lot of people ask for the kind of inverse of Secret Rendezvous, where everyone else draws a card and then you draw that many cards. That's a card I think we could make someday. I think there's stuff for white to do, and we've got some cool card draw stuff in the future. I'm not going to get into too much of it because I've talked about it a bunch in Good Morning Magic videos. But yeah, there's some neat stuff coming down the pipeline, and Flumph and some of the stuff in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms is one version of that. Okay, moving on. Let's go to Tuba Taylor. Tuba Taylor, are you still out there? Hello, Tuba Taylor. So, okay. We have, let's see, Rin and Siri, right? Oh, I typed in Siri like iPhone as opposed to Siri. So here's Rin and Siri Inseparable, the Buy a Box promo for Corset 2021. Thank you, Eric. I'm glad you like my shirt. This is from Roosevelt's, who for my non-magic apparel, I own a lot of stuff from. So what's going on with Rin and Siri? Well, with Corset 2021, we kind of have adopted this philosophy with the core set of, hey, when the core set comes around, you might see some new stuff added into Magic. And this time around, a big thing we were adding in was dogs. All of you dog fans, here you are with Rin and Sari and all the other dogs that showed up in the set. Finally, after many years, we switched from Hound Tribal or Hounds Matter to dogs, which makes me very happy. I was always on Team Dog. Hopefully some of you are too. And so we knew we were doing dogs. We knew we were doing cats. It was natural to do the cat-dog card and combine them both together. So we made Rin and Sari, and I don't know this for sure, but I think the lead designer was looking for a place to put a Cat and Dog Matters card, couldn't quite get it into the main set, and the Buy a Box promo was perfect for it. And these days, if we have a card that's going to make for a really fun commander deck or a hook, we often try and make it legendary. So Rin and Sari is a kind of a bottom-up card that creatively, there weren't existing characters, and creative kind of had to come up with, hey, what's a cat and a dog that we could do here together. And they came up with Rin and Sari, who were super cool, and I'm really glad we got to do them in the set. hopefully many of you have enjoyed building a commander decks around them, the cat dog deck, as it were. All right, moving on to, hey, a certain random guy, can I get a check on the current queue? I currently have an old one up on my screen, but I would love it. Oh, Matt, that's an awesome. So Matt does editing, which is an incredibly important role at Wizards and is super unsung. A lot of people hear editing and they think, oh, you just uppercase the letters or something. No, it's so much more than that. When I have my mess of a Magic set, I just hand the set over to Matt, and then he makes it look pretty and gorgeous and awesome. And one of the main things they do is look at things like, how should they be laid out on the card? What order should the abilities go in? How should we template this? Is it a better way to read it? All that kind of thing. And so what Matt was just saying here is they ordered the abilities on this card, the dog one, then the cat one, by the order they appear from left to right in the artwork, which makes me very happy, I have to say. All right, Ren and 6. So we're working on Modern Horizons 1, which I'm so glad I can we have a 1 and 2 now, because before, whenever I would call out Modern Horizons 1, someone would inevitably be like, oh, so are you doing a second one? And the answer was always yes, but I just had to be like, no, the set's called MH1. It says so on the bottom left-hand corner there, see? Anyway, so we're working on Modern Horizons 1, and normally, all of our Planeswalkers that we do are top-down designs, right? We're like, oh, we're going to do Jace. Well, here's what a Jace can do. Hey, we're going to do Sarkin Returned. He's going to be Teamer this time, and come back, changed. The Planeswalkers are almost always top-down. The design team for Modern Horizons 1, Adam Prozac being the lead, had the idea of what if with Modern Horizons 1 we finally did something different, and that was a bottom-up design. We make a brand new character that is built around what we think would be an interesting card and an interesting set of mechanics. And so that's where this came from. They found something kind of unique and bottom-up to Ren and 6, and that's where it came from. And as a reminder, if you don't know the terms, top-down is when we have a flavorful concept and we create a card out of that. Mini sets like Theros and Innistrad have a lot of top-down cards, things with a really strong creative hook. Bottom-up is when we start with a card concept and then create a card out of it. And that's what happened with Ren and 6. So there is a fun story for you. Moving right along from Ren and 6, let's move on to Luck Vamp with Ruin Crab. Gotta love Ruin Crab. Okay, Ruin Crab. Voxy's not here, so I feel like we can talk about Mill now and be safe about it. So, Ruin Crab is an innocent little 1-mana creature that mills your opponent for 3 cards. Ruin Crab is a callback to another card from Zendikar, which many of you might recognize as this little guy, Hedron Crab. Now, can you spot the difference between Hedron Crab and Ruin Crab? Well, Ruin Crab has a 3rd toughness. That is one of them. But the big reason why we did the new crab here is Hedron Crab's most powerful mode, ironically, was not about milling your opponent, it was about milling yourself. And people would play dredge decks and the like, and actually mill themselves to get their library into their graveyard to get all their effects, which was not the thing we were trying to do with Hedron Crab in the first place. So when we did Zendikar Rising, we thought it'd be fun to do another Hedron Crab. Targeting yourself was still a problem, so we made Ruin Crab, which can only hit your opponent. You have to play it the more reasonable way, and you get a 3rd toughness to compensate, so 2/2s beware. Okay, moving on from Ruin Crab, we have Gaming Nacho Girl. Hopefully, I don't know if you're still out there, Gaming Nacho Girl. Let me know in the chat if you still are. But you are asking about maybe the most powerful card in all of Magic. It's unbeatable, nearly. And that, of course, is Stormcrow. I find it amusing, by the way, that when I searched for Stormcrow, both Crowstorm and Stormcrow appeared. That's pretty funny. Metal Mario, if you want to add a card request, just say it, and we'll get it on the list. At some point, I should probably close this list, because I've been doing this for 2 hours, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to continue, but yeah, I probably got at least another good half hour in me. Okay, anyway, here we are. Stormcrow. Let's talk about this. This is a meme card. It showed up in Alliances, as this version right here. Actually, Alliances had a weird thing where there were multiple versions of the same art. So here's another Stormcrow if you're so inclined, if you want both other sides of it, I guess. And just a totally random card, whatever. Then it got reprinted a number of times. It was in Portal with this amazing artwork, which I do love, by Una Fricker. It showed up in 6th edition, it showed up in 7th edition, 8th, 9th, and so on. And it was still innocuous. But then something happened. The internet happened. And for some reason, and I don't know where it started, but Stormcrow became a meme. Stormcrow being the most powerful card in all of Magic. It kind of swept through Reddit. I think Reddit is really where it kicked off at. Now it's embedded in Magic as a meme. So we've done a few fun things with it. It showed up in Mystery Booster. I put it in the Mystery Booster set on the foil sheet because I thought it would be funny to have a foil version of it out there. We made, of course, the full art version of it in the April Fool's Secret Lair. So that's pretty fun. And it has a long legacy. And my favorite fact about Stormcrow is the meme about Stormcrow actually inspired a physical store. There's a place up in Vancouver, Canada called the Stormcrow Tavern, which is named after Stormcrow. And it is a gaming cafe. Super cool. If you go up there to Vancouver, check it out. And yeah, I don't know. That's what I got. That's what I got on Stormcrow. Grathama, the All-Devouring. I will tell you exactly where this came from. And it's funny because to me it is so obvious, but not everyone knows where this came from. And so if you know, type it in the chat. I'm curious if anyone out there has figured it out. But anyway, here we go. So I'm working on Battle Bond. And one of the things about Battle Bond is it is inspired by gaming. So it's kind of a set that has like a sports and gaming bent to it, which is pretty cool. And so I tapped into not only a lot of different sports, but also esports as well. And of course, there's this arena you go through and you run through and so on and so forth. And in the MOBA genre, a thing that is often true is there's a big monster that everyone will gather around, and when you defeat it, your entire party gets a buff. And so that's the card I tried to make here with Grathama. It's kind of modeled after like Baron Nashor, for example, from League of Legends. But really, this is a trope across all MOBAs. And it's a big creature that when it dies, gives you a reward for killing it off. Now, I tried a ton of different versions of this card. My first thing that I came up with for it was a version where you gave it to your opponent. It had like sleeper agent text. When it comes into play, your opponent gains control of it. And then when you kill it, you got a ton of different rewards. But the problem with that card is it was basically just a combo with Doomblade. You're like, all right, well, I'm never going to actually give this to my opponent. I'm just going to play it, give it to you, and then Doomblade it and get all the rewards, right? Then we tried other versions where it had to fight. And anyway, we tried a lot of versions. And ultimately, this was the version I was happiest with. And Benny Smith has a really fun deck with this where it's called Fight Club, where it fights things that I really enjoy. So yeah, this is a card that is really wonky, and the people who love it, love it. So hope you enjoyed all that on Baron. I believe the next card we're going to take a look at is Low Batteries 68, a pretty nice number, which is Devouring Rage. This is a card I remember working on. So when I was hired into Wizards, now a lot of folks know me as the Commander guy, right? They're like, Gavin, he does Commander stuff. Woo, gotta love Commander, it's great. Oh, here's the list, thank you very much. A certain random guy. But when I was hired in, believe it or not, I was hired in as a development person. Now it would be called play design, the people who balance the formats. And Devouring Rage was in the first set that I worked on, Gatecrash. So I built a lot of standard decks to try and balance this card. And we were doing something kind of unique. It was a 3-mana Planeswalker. We didn't really do a lot of those at this point. This was still pretty early. This was 10 years ago. And it was going to be a red-green 3-mana Planeswalker. And I'd say some of the biggest discussions in my early days at Wizards was, should the +1 leave the card on top or put it on the bottom of your library? And it might sound asinine that so much time was spent discussing that element of the card. But it's true, but it's a really big deal, right? Because if you look at your top card and it's not a creature, you're forced to leave it there. And in an aggressive deck, which Domri is often in, if you are like searching for creatures to hit, it's a super big double whammy, because you look at your top card, and if it's a creature, great, you draw it. If it's a land, it stays there, and you're whiffing on a draw next turn. Now, Zach Hill argued that you're basically just seeing your card a turn ahead, so it's not actually that bad. But if Domri dies, it's a really big feel bad to know you have a land on top of your deck. Additionally, the most fun part of Magic, most designers agree, is the draw step. And so this takes away the mystery of the draw step a little bit. So, ultimately, I wish we had kind of gone the other way and put it on the bottom of your library or into your graveyard if you missed. And these days, you see a lot more designs that are in that direction. But this card still ended up seeing play. It saw some standard play for sure. And, who knows how the world would have been if we had tweaked it a little bit. But there's a design story for you about Domri Raid. But, okay, Jadaris. Let's talk about Tysis. So this card showed up in Time Spiral, and almost everything in Time Spiral is a reference to something else. And Tysis is something that happened on the Phyrexian invasion. Something about the oil, something like that. I think it's also a real word. I'm actually going to look it up here. It is pronounced Tysis, right? So it's like IRL, it's like tuberculosis, basically, according to the dictionary definition. But I think in Magic, it's like an early stage of phyresis or something like that, maybe. Yeah, here it is. Bam. Thanks, Magic Wiki. Tysis is a disease caused by long exposure to Power Stone radiation. So, yeah. Anyway, there's a thing for you. So, you can read more about it on the internet. The short version, though, it's a reference to that. It also ended up with a card name that is so hard to pronounce. It is pronounced Tysis, which you probably would not expect. So, Tysis, suspend 5, 1B. The fun thing about this card, or the not fun thing about this card, depending on which side you're on, is that it's a card you suspend early, and you hope it works out for you. Because it's going to take 5 turns, and if you're the only player with creatures in play when Tysis comes off suspend, you have to cast it, and you have to target your own creature. And I have killed many people by killing off my only creature in response to Tysis unsuspending, because it hits their own creature and they lose a bunch of life. So this is a very Time Spiral-y design. It's not only a reference to a weird thing, but it has some very weird gameplay to it as well. Suspend, it's also got quad black in the mana cost for some reason. I don't know. It's a weird card. But there's some fun Tysis trivia for you. Anyway, Yadav, let's talk about Codex Shredder. So we're working on Return to Ravnica, and Eric Lauer, when he's making sets, Eric Lauer is a genius. He has been the lead designer for a number of critically acclaimed sets, such as Innistrad. Absolute brilliant guy. And he has this kind of philosophy of you want to make sure that there are cards which a deck definitely wants, but you also want to sure that there are cards that it sometimes wants and sometimes other decks want. So in Black-Green, in the first set, Return to Ravnica, you had the Golgari, who are all about the graveyard. Great, that's awesome. There's a lot of cards in that set that reward you for the graveyard. Codex Shredder, though, is an interesting one. It is an artifact that anybody can play. It's best in the Golgari deck because it mills you. And it mills you and you get stuff back from your graveyard, but any deck can play it, right? If your Azorius draft has gone a little sideways, or you end up with some of the black or green self-mill cards, you can still put this into your deck. So it's an interesting card that doesn't silo you as much. Especially in Ravnica sets, it's so easy to get siloed. I'm Azorius, you're Golgari, you're Izzet, and so on down the line. So having some artifacts that different people are interested in playing, and you might need to, think about someone else might take, is important. And that's kind of where Codex Shredder came from. So great call out. Of course, this ended up showing up in the Lantern control deck, which was never an intention for this card, but that entire deck was never an intention of anything. All right, I'm going to pull up a card that I'm sure is one of Matt Tabak's favorites for the next card. This is by The Daily Maple Syrup. I hope you're still out there, The Daily Maple Syrup. Great name. Warp World is a card that I do not believe currently fits on a Magic card. Matt Tabak can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is below the minimum font size we use today on a card. Maybe that's not true, but Tabak will tell us here in a second in the comments. This is a wonky card. This is your classic red, as Matt alludes to in the chat here. This is your classic weird red rare, right? There was a rule for a while by some drafters that they told me, where when you open up the rare that has 12 lines of rules text. You should always pass it because it's always a scramble verse or something. This is a wonky card, and it totally changes the entire game. When you cast this, everyone's permanents are going to get reshuffled around. This is a kind of card that we don't really do as much of anymore. Cards like this and Illicit Auction and things like that, because big spells are often big spells for social play formats like Commander are often where those cards show up in Commander. And Warp World is kind of a nightmare to resolve in Commander. It has its fans. I'm sure that there's Warp World fans out there. Maybe you are even one yourself, the daily maple syrup. But it's a little bit too chaotic and it impacts everybody a little bit too much. Things like Grip of Chaos, Warp World cause that to happen. So I will say, though, that despite the fact that it's a wonky card that we probably don't play much of, yeah, Ghost Host I in the chat notes that Thieves Auction is a win condition in Commander because everyone scoops to it. If you don't know what Thieves Auction does, I'll put it up here because it is cruel. It has everyone basically choose a card that is exiled. You exile everything, and then you all pick a card to take. It takes forever. It's a nightmare. Anyway, Warp World. The thing about Warp World is that there was, at one point, believe it or not, a competitive standard deck that played it. Now, it wasn't tier 1. It was like tier 2 or so, but it was a blast to play. And what you would do is your deck was full of token makers and creatures that when they came into play, returned a card from your graveyard to your hand. Eternal Witness, that kind of thing. So you would cast Warp World. You'd shuffle everything in. You'd get everything back. You'd have some token makers make more permanents. Your Eternal Witness would return Warp World from your graveyard to your hand. You'd have enough lands from your Warp World that you could cast it again, and you just keep going on until eventually every Warp World would net you more permanents because of the tokens, until eventually your entire deck was in play. It was a blast. It was a super goofy deck to play, but it took forever to win, but everyone was always smiling. And of course, while you're getting more and more and more permanents, your opponent's deck, who isn't built this way, is losing permanents with every iteration. So this is was a really fun deck to play in Standard all the way back when. Not for everyone, but there you go. I'm going to take a moment to hit up Watsy Matt, who's asking about Dorat, the perfect pet, or Sprite Dragon, which I'll show off right here. Dorat does not work in the search engine. One second, I look up Sprite Dragon. So I'm going to talk about the Godzilla thing a little bit, because I think that's the most interesting part of this card to me. Despite the fact that I get to choose promos, by the way, and I chose this cool promo for a Japanese magazine. Japan gets some pretty fun promos. This one is for, I believe, Koro Koro magazine, only inserted in Koro Koro magazines in Japan, which is pretty cool. Okay, let's see. Here we are. Yes, a certain random guy. You have earned the ability to give a plug, so you're good for this. All right, let's talk about Dorat, the perfect pet. So we're making a Korea. And the entire time we are, working on a Korea, we call it the Godzilla set, right? It's from the beginning. Like originally the name for the set was Monster Island. Oh, hey, Electrotal there. Good to see you there. I don't know if you were around earlier when I answered your Terramorphic Expanse question, but if you weren't, you may want to go back and listen to it because I think you'll find it very fascinating. If you have a question, drop it in the chat and I'll try and get to it. Go ahead. I got to finish the talk about Dorat though. This is Matt's card and I want to do him right. So, Dorat, the perfect pet. We're working on a Korea. The whole time, it was kind of called the Godzilla set. The early name for this set was Monster Island, where all these like kaiju were roaming around. So the whole time, we were modeling it with Godzilla very much in mind. And it wasn't until very late in the process that the product architecture team was like, wait a second. What if we actually did Godzilla here? What if we did this thing? Matt will get to your thing in a second. What if we actually did this thing? So we reached out to Toho, and they got on board, and we did the partnership, which was a pretty wild partnership. So what then had to happen is Mike Turian figured out basically all the characters that would make sense to use, and presented them to Dave Humphreys. Now we had to find some pretty deep cuts for the set. Dorat, I'm not gonna pull up the YouTube video here. You can go Google it on your own. But they're like these weird little creatures that live on an island, and I think like evolve into Godzilla. They're like they're not baby Godzillas, but they're like young versions of a Godzilla monster, or they like hang out with someone or something. I don't know. The Godzilla wiki is a wild place. I have read a lot on the Godzilla wiki, and every time I go there, I'm just like, this really happened in a movie that was released, you know? So, yeah, alien pets. There you go. I think there was a time traveling Godzilla one where people from the future come back and they put Dorats on an island, and then they radiate the island that Godzilla was supposed to be on, and it turns into Ghidorah. I think that's right. All three of them become Ghidorah. That sounds right to me. Something like that. Anyway, I'm not a Godzilla expert, but regardless, yeah, Mox Amber has it in the chat. There we go. So. We go to Dave Humphreys, and we're like, Dave, here are the monsters we want in the set. And Dave goes through his set and picks the ones he thinks will be the best fit for it. And he thought this would be the best fit for Sprite Dragon. So, yeah, there you go. That's how we got Godzilla on Magic cards. That's where Dora the Perfect Pet came from. I see NSPP19 is like, oh no, join late. Kierno Centiro was the only card he asked about. Great. I'll go back to that right now. Sorry for skipping over you. Must have been a very similar name. A lot of numbers at the end of names here on Twitch, so, you know, I probably confused you for someone else, but now you are unforgettable to me. I'm going to take a second here to answer Shivam Bot's question. Electro Tall over there in the chat, asking a question about, will we see Commander cards reprinted in promo versions? Great question. The place I get asked about this the most, I think, is actually, speaking of, Godzilla cards. Because the Godzilla cards in the Commander decks, or excuse me, the mutate cards in the Commander decks did not get Godzilla versions, where, sorry, wrong term, not Godzilla versions, did not get the line art sketch versions. For example, as you will see here on Snap decks, right? So all of these cards got their comic book versions in the set. They look super cool. I thought this was an awesome style. But the ones in the Commander decks that had Mutate did not get this. And so there are 3 cards in the Mutate deck that didn't get it. There's, of course, the Face Commander, who is called, I don't remember, the Face Commander, and a couple others. Anyway, they didn't show up. A Trimi, there we go. Here we go. So will we ever see them? I think someday we will. I've pitched a few people ways we can make them happen. I think someday we probably will get them. I don't know when, I don't know exactly where, but I'm keeping up my location for it. KP 539000, thank you for staying up to 5 a.m. in the UK. That is nuts. Thank you for spending your morning/evening with me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming out, man. So a Trimi, right, and a couple other cards are in the space. I think we will do them someday. Nowadays, we try and make sure that the cards get these treatments. So maybe someday you'll be seeing those, Shivam. Stay tuned. Okay. Questions I'll try and take later. I got cards to get through. Here we go. More cards. Let's do it. Let's go on to the next card, which I missed. It was NSPP19 with Kaianos and Tiro of Meletis. Let's do this. Here we go. Kaianos and Tiro of Meletis. Here we go. Okay, let's take a look at these guys. So, when we were working on the Commander decks, and one of the Commander decks had a really unusual theme. It was going to be a group hug themed Commander deck. Why is that? Well, in C16, we were doing 4-color Commander decks for the first time, and probably the only time. Maybe we'll do it again someday, but certainly I doubt we'll do 5 4-color Commander decks at the same time. Because what they quickly found is, when you have all 4 colors, all the decks become a mishmash of everything. And so what the design team decided to do was define every color by what it was missing, or define every deck by what it was missing. So instead of trying to figure out what a red, green, white, blue card does, what does a not black card do? And in this case, with Kaianos and Tiro of Meletis and this deck, the idea was, okay, well, it doesn't have black, so it's not selfish. Therefore, it is extremely giving. So the idea of a group hug deck was born. And that's where these two came from, was being a group hug commander. One fun fact about this deck is I remember in a lot of playtests, the deck had trouble winning the game. It would just make the game take forever, and it would just turtle up, and you could never end the game, basically. So they kept iterating on the deck to make sure it had enough ways to close. But yeah, this is the commander. It's a lot of fun. It's a great group hug commander. These are the two characters, and you see this archway in the back here? This is this like archway of Meletus. Well, in the card Guardians of Meletus, you see that same archway, and they are the very guardians that these characters were founded on. So that's pretty cool. Fun little Easter egg for you, and that's where those characters came from. All right, lots of discussion about Mutate in the chat. I'm a fan of Mutate. I'll admit I was skeptical at first, but I have a lot of fun with it. Ikoria was a set I really enjoyed, and I'm not just because I was on the design team. I just really enjoyed it. But anyway, let's keep moving on here. And with Eric asking about Arkelos Lagoon Mystic. So here is the turtle itself. So what is going on with this card? Let's see. So we were working on Commander Legends, and it's actually kind of a funny story here. So I was on the vision design for Commander Legends. I came up with the idea, I pitched it, went through, and then the set was going to get made. And I did the first half of it, and then handed off it for final design to Jules. And my big design note in the first half of design was like, we can't let you draft more than 2 colors. Because what I found is, whenever you add in more colors, it's just better. You should always play more colors if you can. And so, originally, like, we even tried drafting without the color identity rule, and it was just always more colors equals better. Well, so I was very adamant to Jules, no 3-color commanders. Whatever you do, no 3-color commanders. So I handed the set off to Jules. Now, this set was very unusual in that when I handed the set off to Jules to be the lead designer, I eventually turned into the product architect for the set. Now, the product architect's thing with the set is they're the person like watching over the set and helping guide the designer while also working on all the other teams associated with it. So trying to work with marketing on the set and packaging, and yes, of course, Matt Tabak over in editing to make stuff happen. Well, we're a little ways into Jules leading the set, and there's a lot of, what I'm noticing in drafting is there's, you never drafting 3 colors because you can't, and that would add a lot of replayability into the set to have 3 colors. Additionally, the set is like missing a little bit of oomph at rare. There's a lot of like people who were sure will be disappointed if they don't get a cool 3-color legend. So I go to Jules as a product architect, and I'm like, Jules, I think you should put 3-color legends in your set, which is the funniest thing to me because like I lobbied so hard to make sure we didn't do any 2-color legends or any 3-color legends. Anyway, so I go to Jules and say it. So at that point, the set has no 3-color legends. Jules didn't make any. So what he did is he talked with his team and came up with with some mini teams. And the mini teams, what they were going to do was try and come up with 3-color legend ideas. And so they came with a bunch of really wild out there ideas. And the idea was that they would all be build-arounds. So you have like Averna and Arkelos and a lot of cards like that. So that's where that came from, was this kind of build-around thing. All 3 of these colors have things that get into play tapped, right? Green, blue, and black. And you want to untap your lands as they come in. So that's what's going on here. Which is by TT Wild. TT Wild, are you still out there? Where you are asking about Thunderous Orator. Thunderous Orator is your card right here, right now. Oh, here we are. TT Wild has a question here in chat. Looks like a callback to Audric, Lunar Markle, and Majestic Miriarch. But is it really? Miriarch was a mythic and Orator is only uncommon. This is because the others only saw fringe constructed play. So I think a lot of people look at effects and they're like, this is an effect that's only shown up at rare before. It couldn't be at a lower rarity. And that's true. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of the time it's about the power level of the card and also the first time that it's introduced. The first time a card does something, it's going to be novel and it's probably more of a rare, and then we'll learn about it and we can bring it down in rarity. with this card, we've done this before with Audric, we've done it before with other cards, but it really could just be an uncommon white effect, especially if it's not doing much else on its own. It's not legendary like Audric was, and so that's why this ended up being where it is. You'll also note that it does not grab every single keyword out there. It does not grab hexproof, for example. So it is kind of choosy and mostly grabbing keywords that can be in white and black. Trample, a little bit of an outlier here. But yeah, this, really what all these cards are based off of. I know you mentioned Audric in the chat and Majestic Myriarch, but the card that is actually based on, that is worth bringing up, is this card, Concerted Effort. I don't know how many of you all remember this one from original Ravnica. It has never been reprinted, but this is the card that kind of spawned it all. It was a rare, and that's that inspired Audric, and I think it's a pretty fun keyword granting thing. So yeah, putting it uncommon I think is reasonable. One other thing that we noticed is for a while it was like, okay, well, these effects can't be uncommon, we should put them at rare. And then in Dominaria, Dave Humphreys had a strong feelings about something that he kind of pioneered, which is, I think the card is called Damping Sphere. Yeah, okay. So he had this philosophy that started with Damping Sphere, and it was basically this. Look, no one is excited to open this card at rare, but it's a card that should exist, and we want to exist, and players will enjoy or sideboard or have fun with. We should be okay making some uncommons in every set that look a little more like rares. One, so when players are opening packs, they get really excited about it, and they're like, "Ooh, I got something extra juicy in my uncommon spot." Sometimes, a little bit, but also because these cards need to exist somewhere. And to me, this card is a great example. Thunderous Orator would have been an extremely underwhelming rare, I think, for a lot of people. You'd open that and be like, a junk rare, I don't want this. But at uncommon, it's pretty cool to have that as an uncommon, right? It's a really, as you brought up, a novel and unique uncommon. So that's pretty cool. Watsy Matt sounds like he has a fun story in the chat about Animus of Predation, which I will let him tell. Not that I have to give him permission. He can say whatever he wants, but you should also pay attention to that if you aren't already. Moving on, we're going to go to Tuprum with Kaya the Inexorable. Kaya the Inexorable. Let's take a look here. So this is a Planeswalker from Kaldheim, and we knew for a long time we're going to do Kaya in Kaldheim. It just made a lot of sense. Went through a lot of iterations of the story, so many iterations of the story. And Kaya was always a piece of it, more or less, as far as I can remember. So we knew we wanted to do Kaya. She knew she was going to be white-black, so that kind of filled that up pretty quickly. And Watsy Matt points out that I'm on the other card that does a similar thing to Thunderous Orator. We forgot Trample. We just forgot Trample, which is pretty funny. But no one noticed. Love you, Matt. Love you, Matt. I think that's a great story still. Matt's like, sorry for the bad story. I think it's a great story. Anyway, so with Kaya, we're trying to figure out what to do with her. Kaya's always been a tough Planeswalker to design for, because from her very first design, which if you'll recall is in Conspiracy, this card, Kaya Ghost Assassin, it was a wonky card to start with, right? It's a Planeswalker that only goes down and exiles itself. So finding the space for Kaya has been a bit of a challenge. But with this card, we're like, okay, what's a unique thing Kaya can do? And we came up with this Ghost Form counter idea. And that's kind of what's going on this time. I think we'll continue to see Kaya hone in on her power suite as we make more cards for her. But yeah, that's kind of what was going on here. And I love that we got her into Kaldheim. Okay, let's go. Wow, I still have so many cards to get through. I'm really gonna have to turbo through these. Not going to race through. I'm not gonna not give you what you deserve. But just there's so many cards. I'm now looking at the list and I'm like, that is a ton. Oh, Tuprum asks, what about the emblem? So I'll admit, so a lot of Planeswalker stuff. Planeswalkers are our hardest cards to make. They require the most reps. They require a lot of careful finesse because they're often the cards that get the most looked at in a set. And they show up in standard play a lot of the time. So a lot of the Planeswalker design happens kind of mid to late in the process by the play design team figuring out what a card should do. So I
I would guess this last ability, the emblem ability, probably came from play design as they were figuring out what they wanted to have happen. Flavorfully, I'm going to guess it has something to do with, all the legendary stuff going on in Kaldheim. It's a place of legends. So tying into that theme made some amount of sense. But I actually don't know where it came from. I'm sorry. That is one that I don't know the answer to. I could go look in Multiverse and maybe tell you. Maybe I'll do that in a follow-up. But like I told Matt Tabak earlier, having the file with all the future Magic cards ever in it and doing a stream at the same time was a perilous act. So there you go. All right, on to a T-Trash Queen. We're with Tatiova Benthic Druid. So when we were working on Dominaria, we knew it was about legends. We knew early on this set was going to have a large legendary component. And one of the things we wanted to do was make a bunch of uncommon legends. And it made sense that we would make them signposts for their colored pairs. In Limited, we make these kind of signposts to colored cards to direct you in the draft strategy that Color is trying to do. And this time around, we're going to do it with legends. So we made one for every 2 color pair. And green-blue is what had kind of a go big ramp strategy, which it's had a lot of times now, to be fair. And Tatiova is the card that came out of it. We made it a very straightforward card that has gone on to be extremely popular as a 5-mana 3/3 that draws you a card and gives you life whenever you play a land. I've got a Tatiova commander deck. Many people do. And I think it's really cool that a lot of these uncommon commanders from Dominaria propelled people into creating their first commander decks because their uncommons are easy to get your hands on. So there's something about Tatiova. Otherwise, design-wise, I mean, this was just a really simple design that just got in and stuck. It was really appealing. We did a rare pull of all the uncommon legends internally, and this card pulled really highly early on and just didn't change much. Not all of them are previously existing characters, and yeah, Tatiova was just a new thing we made up. So, gonna keep moving on with the next one, Boss Stabilio with Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker. Okay, what does there say about Kiki Jiki? Well, in Kamigawa, and hopefully you're still out there, Boss Stabilio. Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker. So Kiki Jiki came out in Kamigawa. I don't know much about the story of how it was creating. I do believe that Kiki Jiki was actually important in the Kamigawa story. I think he did something with Kaiga, the Tide Star, maybe? Not a lot of people know the Kamigawa story, so you can go and read the books and find out. Someone in the chat probably knows the answer to this. But anyway, this card, as we all know, has gone on to be incredibly powerful, has shown up in combo decks with, of course, Pestermite-style cards. But back in the day, back when Kamigawa came out, this was a combo not with Pestermite, not with Village Bellbringer, not with any of those things. No. I remember fondly building a deck with Kiki Jiki and... Oh, not this card. What's this card called? Hold on. I guess I wasn't that fond if I can't remember it. I promise you I'll get there. It's here somewhere. Where are you? Here it is. With this card, Root Runner. Right here, where it is, you would lock your opponent out. You would Kiki Jiki your Root Runner. You would make a token. You would put a land on top of their library, and then you would repeat doing that every turn. So that was Splinter Twin before there was Splinter Twin. That's how we did it in the olden days. Now it's all so easy. But Kiki Jiki is a really fun red effect. People love it. They love playing it in Commander. They love playing it in competitive formats where they can. Thank you, Mara and Lorelei, for subscribing or following. Both of you, thank you. And we've reprinted it a number of times, from the Vault Legends version to the Masters version. It was even in Mystery Booster, where you could even draft the Splinter Twin combo, all the way to the old frame version in Time Spiral Remastered. So, really cool. That made it all the way. All right, going on to Furnace Dragon 80, asking about Experiment Kraj. All right, Experiment Kraj, what do you got for us? So here is Experiment Kraj. This was one of the first cards I remember hearing about being played in Commander. Really, really early on in when Commander was just starting and I was just hearing about it. This was a card that I remember a lot of people played because it was a really goofy build-around legend, and people loved Simic. It was kind of a goofy +1/+1 counter deck you could make. And nowadays there's +1/+1 counter legends out the wazoo, right? But back then it was not so much. And so there were a lot of fun decks built around this card in Commander. I unfortunately do not know many stories about this card. I know a lot of old card stories, but this is one that I kind of have a blind spot on. I do remember it being previewed and getting excited. A lot of folks were excited about it when it was previewed. Thank you to Nicodemus Bane for following. Much appreciated. But yeah, I don't really remember too much about this. I remember right there, Experiment Kraj and Momir Vig were both in Dissension. They were the two blue-green legends. Yeah, I don't really have too much more on this card other than it was a sweet commander in the early days and is worth trying out if you haven't already. Sorry, so that was kind of a weak one. I apologize, Furnace Dragon 80. But there you go. That's what I got for you on this. I've gone 2 hours and 40 minutes with very few that I don't have trivia for, so I apologize. Okay, Real Peaches asks for Carador or Muldrotha or Maelstrom Wanderer. Which one should I take? I guess I'll take Muldrotha because I was on the team for Dominaria. So we were trying to make a lot of different legends for the set. We wanted some cool mythic legends going on. And a Sultai legend made a ton of sense to do with everything else going on. Black, green, and blue all can do stuff with the graveyard. So this is pretty cool. Now, I will admit, here's a fun thing about this card, color pie wise. It's not really that blue. Because green and black can both get things back from their graveyard. Black can bring a lot of creatures back into play. Green can put them into your hand. Blue technically represents like artifacts on this card or something. But what you wouldn't know is originally Muldrotha let you play one of each card type out of your graveyard. That includes spells. It was a lot more blue back then. It could cast, your incidents and your sorceries and all that stuff. But as it turns out, casting the same removal spell over and over was not very fun. Shocker, who would have thought it? And that was cut. And it turns out Muldrotha is still one of, if not maybe the best Sultai commander. So I think the card turned out just fine without that line of text. And it's not the most bluey thing out there in the world. But you can play artifacts out of your graveyard. Close enough. And yeah, that's a fun story about Muldrotha. Let's talk about, let's go to MX Eris with Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. So, two teams that I loved working on. I mean, I love working on all my teams, of course. But two teams that are near and dear to my heart are both the Conspiracy sets. I got to be on both of them, and they were both a blast. So in the first Conspiracy, we made Selvala, who is, Muldrotha uses she, her. That's great to know. I will use that in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for pointing that out, Lorelei, and a certain random guy. So Selvala is was in Conspiracy 1, and you might not remember her because this card is a little less played, but it is one of the 5 cards in Magic with the parlay mechanic. And she draws players' cards and makes mana. So when we were working on Conspiracy 2, we were like, hey, we'll do another Selvala. I think we were making a legend for every mono color, like Renzo, and we were revisiting a lot of legends from the first set, like Renzo, once again. So Selvala made a lot of sense to do, and we made a new one. So we decided we'd make a mono green one, and we would allow it to both make you mana and draw cards, which is what the first one did as well. Let's see, what's interesting design-wise? I guess what's interesting design-wise is that first ability, which really came out to being like, hey, how can we make this card interesting in multiplayer? It lets green draw cards, but it also lets other players draw cards if they have the biggest creature. So the first ability was really spawned by multiplayer love and multiplayer design. Conspiracy was great. It really pioneered the space for a lot of that stuff that we then saw later in Battle Bond and otherwise. So that's what's kind of going on with Selvala here. You were asking about the original Theros gods. And I've got a fun story about these. Cool. So what's going on? Well, thank you for the follow, Arthur H. Costa. I really appreciated it. I appreciate everyone so much who has followed during this stream. So the original Theros gods, this was the first time we were making gods in Magic. And so a lot of pressure was put on them to figure out how we're going to do them. Because this was huge. We're putting gods on a type line in Magic. This was a big deal. And now we've seen so many of them, but at the time it was a really huge deal. So we tried a lot of things and a lot of very strange mechanics. The one that sticks in my head was for a while they used this Nyx mechanic, where when you cast them, they went into a special Nyx zone. And then if you hit enough devotion, they would come into play from the Nyx zone and do something. We tried a lot of wild effects. But eventually, we decided, what about just enchantments that were indestructible and turned into a creature once you had enough devotion? And that's where that came from. And then from there, it was just a matter of finding cool effects. So, we wanted to make sure that they all had static effects that were cool, and then things that would be awesome if they turned on. Mostly the bodies were awesome if they turned on, right? They're indestructible, huge creatures. So that's where that came from, and I'm really happy with this. I think for our first time out with gods, we nailed it enough times that another sets over and over again used them in different ways. Kaldheim, which I guess did it in a very different way, but Amonkhet and Theros again. And I don't know if we would have gotten Theros 2's gods if we didn't do these like this the first time around. So thank you MX Eris, thank you Ragrock14 for that question, and Doomlord5 for asking about Erebos. Fun little trivia for you about how the god mechanic came to be. Sorry, Spirit Reaver. Sweet name though. It should be a compliment that your name was so cool. I thought it was a Magic card. So how about that? So, Gelectrode showed up in Guild Packs in the original Ravnica block in the Izzet Guild, and was the creature that introduced, or one of many creatures technically, because they all showed up in Guild Pact, that introduced the weird creature type. Weirds are a Ravnica thing. They are these kind of amorphous, strange creatures that do stuff with magic. The Izzet love them. So we made it there. Now, this is a card that is brutal. This card is so strong. It is a repeatable removal spell. It's a TIM, a Prodigal Sorcerer effect, that you can keep untapping. This card was a first pick slam dunk in Ravnica, and these days we would not make a card like this at Uncommon because it is so strong and backbreaking and limited. It's really easy to just make all your opponent's creatures die and control the whole game with this 0/1. It's fragile, admittedly, but yeah, this card was many players' favorite card in Guild Pact, at least in Draft. It was a blast to play, and this card, along with cards like We Dragonauts, which was a super fun card to play with and everyone loves saying, and cards like Izzet Chronarch, really propelled Izzet to be a popular guild in Guild Pact and one of the most popular guilds out there. I think Izzet is in the top 3 most popular guilds probably. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. And partially on the back of Gelectrode. So some fun stories there for you there. Metal Mario, it's me, Metal Mario. Are you still out there? You want to know about Dream Trawler? Hello, Dream Trawler. What is there to say about this card? Well, I'll tell you something you might not know. So I'll just tell you one little fun fact. This card is mostly like top-down control finisher, So mostly, for the most part, it's just like a very mechanical card that was meant to be a card that control decks could play, which they ultimately did. But there is one interesting thing you might not know. Dream Trawler has a mechanic that references a previous Magic card and a previous Magic card on Theros. In fact, it's a previous Sphinx Magic card on Theros. Do you know what it is? It's this card. Prognostic Sphinx. This card has the ability to allow you to give it hexproof and tap it by discarding a card, not unlike Dream Trawler. Exactly the same thing. When we made Theros the first time around, this was a card we were all really excited about and never really was quite good enough, but we really enjoyed this kind of hexproof and protection. It's this great shields down moment of like, oh, well, you can still use your removal spell against a hexproof creature by attacking through it. Yeah, your Doomblade doesn't work, but you can clear the way for your attacker if you want to. And so when we were making this card, and we had this ability, we're like, oh, let's call back to Prognostic Sphinx and give it hexproof and tap it, which is a fun little nod to that card. So that's what's going on here. That's the story of Dream Trawler. And a lot of folks might not know that reference. Okay, I am through the list of people, except for the people that I skipped. Now it's time to go back to the beginning and hit the people that I skipped because they already had one. James Sui, or in the chat, points out that Spirit Weaver is a card in Invasion. So not quite, but close. Cool. Okay, here is the remaining list. If you set a card and it is not on here, please let me know. The list is now closed, unfortunately. I've been doing this for about 3 hours. I'm going to wrap up after this, but I will tell you all right now, this has gone so well and was so much fun. I will do another stream at some point. I don't know that this is going to be a weekly thing because I have a lot of other video stuff I'm doing already, but maybe let's make this a Good Morning Magic or Good Evening Magic episode. So be sure to follow if you want to hear about more of this in the future and give me more card requests in the future. Or if you're really wild, you can subscribe. A certain random guy, yeah, you can add one more card to the list. You've done an amazing job keeping track, so thank you so much. All right, let's go through the remaining cards on this list. Tom W. Twitch 1, if you are still there, you have Sherrick's Raging Isle on this list of things that remain. What is there to say about Sherrick's besides the obvious ridiculous thing of it being a legendary Leviathan crab that is a 0/17? I mean, look at the card. Look at this. Look at the card. Let's see. What does there say? So, I do not know much about this card, other than the first time I saw it, I smiled and thought it was hilarious, and I thought it was awesome. And a thing about Magic design is when enough people smile and find a card fun and funny, usually that means it'll stick. Because ultimately, we are making a game. Games are fun, and giving people like strong emotional reactions like humor is really enjoyable. And so this is a card that everyone loved and was so much fun that we're just like, yeah, we're going to do it. And is it the most strong card? No. Is it an amazing commander? Also no. But is it sweet? Will you build a sea monster tribal commander deck around it because you think it's sweet? Probably. James Sui asks, was it always 17 toughness? I don't know. I don't know why 17. Someone did the math and was just like, yeah, this is the number. This is what it should be. Yeah, I do not know much about this card, unfortunately. But it does make me smile. I will say that. And it's cool. One of the great things about Commander is that people play with the build decks for reasons other than just power, right? It's like, I just love this card. It's awesome. It makes me smile. I'm going to use it. And it's one cool thing that we do on some Commander designs is give you incentives for playing basic lands. Basic lands are kind of like naturally written over in Commander because you want to play all your awesome dual lands. It's great to have a reason to play basic lands, and this is a card that incentivizes you to do just that. Pointed out in the chat by Kitkin Guy, 17 is the number of articulations in a crab. It had the smallest toughness that was yet to be printed. That's probably the most likely reason, says TwitchCat. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on to the next card, and Matt Tabak might be looking in Multiverse for what this does. Thank you, Matt, for being the Multiverse man. Posting in chat, found a Multiverse comment. This was very powerful and limited. It was interesting that I wanted enough islands to ensure that I could activate multiple times, but not too many such that it would die. There are weird breakpoints, but it's fun. Well, there you go. Okay, going to next card here. I'm going to go to 8-Bit Shane with Mariki Rabarret. This card is very special to me because Mariki was my first commander deck I ever built. I've got it right down here, in fact. Mariki is a deck I still keep around, and in my commander deck, it's a deck that I haven't changed since I started Wizards. And for me, it's kind of a fun snapshot back in time. Everyone maintains commander decks for different reasons. For me, it's this great snapshot back in time, which makes me really happy. I don't know much about the design of this card. It is from the era of all kinds of legends showing up in Ice Age. Couple fun facts. This later inspired this and Rubinia Soul Singer, which was in Legends, inspired a card later on called, which saw quite a bit of play, called Videlkin Shackles. So it is from these two cards that Videlkin Shackles came from. So that's pretty cool. What do you think of Post Malone's Marinki deck? I thought it was awesome. I tweeted at him after it came out because I just thought it was so cool to see him playing my favorite commander, right? So yeah, I'm glad Post Malone likes one of my favorite commanders. That makes me really happy. Mariki inspired Videlkin Shackles, which is pretty cool. And yeah, it was also in the Time Spiral bonus sheet. I talked about this a bit earlier, but the bonus sheet cards were really chosen just for being weird and unique things that made Aaron Forsyth smile, and from throughout Magic's history. And Mariki totally fit the bill for that. Okay, back to Tom W. Twitch 1 with 3 cards here. So I'm going to rapid fire through your 3 cards. Lonus, Cryptozoologist, Virtus and Gorm, and Humble Defector. Lonus, I know almost nothing about. I do not know the story behind this one very well. Except for we always have fun with Simic because we get to make weird creature types. And this was no exception. Getting to make a Snake Elf Scout is a blast. And I love the kind of fun theme this fits into in Modern Horizons 2 of being junk, where it's like blue, green, all these weirdo tokens. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, the fun part here for me is the creature type. That's a neat thing that's going on with this one. The other cards I can talk a little more about because I know them a little better. Virtus and Gorm. 2 fun facts about Virtus and Gorm. So this is the Battle Bond red, green, black partner pair. So when I was working on Battle Bond, I knew I wanted to do partner pairs at rare and they'd be enemy colored, because not to get into it, but the set had kind of an enemy color theme, because when you're drafting, you would be an allied color and your teammate would be not an allied color combination. So they were almost always an enemy color from you. That's how the draft archetypes worked out. So we knew we wanted to do enemy colored ones at rare. And I was trying to figure out what concepts would be awesome. And the first thing I came up with, which I do still have a soft spot for, was a tree folk and the squirrel that lived in the tree, and also a tree folk and the person who was a botanist walking around. I thought it'd be super fun, right? You have like the tree folk and like the squirrel perched on its side, or the tree folk and the person watering it. That was really cool. But I showed it around to people, and it was really hard to kind of build around, build conceptually around. So I went back into the well of tropes from video games and MOBAs. And one trope that stuck out in my head was the tank and the assassin, right? The idea with these cards is they were opposites. We got the angel and the demon, and Regna and Krav, which, by the way, fun fact about Regna, and this will make Matt Tabak wince maybe. I named Regna because I typed it into the file as anger backwards, and just no one ever changed it. So that's how Regna got its name. I don't know why it didn't change, but there you go. I also named Virtus and Gorm. I just typed them in the file, and they just changed. Or maybe I didn't name Virtus. I did name Gorm. So there you go. Anyway, so let's see. So this was the assassin and tank trope, and we decided that I decided to be fun to do. So for the assassin, making them lose half their life made a lot of sense, and then the tank forcing to be blocked made a lot of sense. So it really just came together, and here's Virtus, here's Gorm, and they're really fun. I think they're a cool partner pairing. Okay. Matt Tabak points out in the chat, we named the Angry Wrathful Planeswalker Angrath. It's cool. A fair point. All right. Another card asked about by Tom Twitch is Humble Defector. So one of the things I did mention way earlier on in the stream that I want to mention again is one of the cool things about working at Wizards is no matter what you do, you have a chance to impact Magic, and you can fill holes, you can send people card designs, you can combine comment on things. And Humble Defector was actually made by an old coordinator who used to work at Wizards named Dan. And as a coordinator, he would do things like print out our playtest decks and stuff like that. Book our meetings, get supplies, that kind of thing. And he came up with this idea at one point and just told someone, and we're like, that's awesome. It's a cool card. Let's put it in a Magic set. And it was as easy as that. And that's how Dan got a card out of nowhere into a set. And we dropped it into Fate Reforged. And it's been a really fun multiplayer card ever since. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the card came from. I think it was totally unchanged. It might have picked up the activate only during your turn thing, because there's a weird thing where you would activate it, give it to the player to your left, and then they would like activate it at the end of the player to your right's turn. It's basically like all about activating it at the right time. We did make it so you had to activate it only during your turn, but other than that, I think it changed basically 0, which is pretty cool. All right, Emmanuel Ona, a few cards here for you. We've got Gaddock Teague. Yes, Emmanuel Ona is a Kithkin guy, loves Kithkin. Let's talk about Gaddock Teague here for a second. So Gaddock Teague is a Kithkin, which appear in Lorwyn, and I'm kind of just going to talk a bit about Kithkin here, because you're the Kithkin guy, and I think it's pretty fun. So Kithkin appeared in Lorwyn. That's where they showed up, right? Well, no, actually not. Kithkin first appeared all the way back in Dominaria, with, of course, Amru Kithkin in Legends. That's right, Amru Kithkin showed up in Legends, and how did they end up on Lorwyn? I don't know. It's complicated, but that's the deal. And so it shows up here, and then there's also another card called just Kithkin, if you can believe it or not. Or it's on Seeker. I don't remember. There's another card that references Kithkin. Oh, right. Sorry, I'm thinking of this card. It's a Kithkin that references the card Seeker. Anyway. But many years later, we're making Lorwyn, and we decide to put Kithkin in there. So Kithkin show up in the set. They're in green and white, and then in Shadowmoor, everything turns evil, and they turn into white-blue. And yeah, so that's kind of what's going on here. This card saw a decent amount of play. It was an early hate bear, and still sees play in some Eternal formats and Commander to this day. Tiny Bones. What is not to love about Tiny Bones? This is another one by Emmanuel Ona. Almost to the end of the list here. What is not to love about this card? So one thing that we are careful about in Commander decks and in a lot of our Commander products is to not point them around things that aren't traditionally fun. Discard is generally not a very beloved strategy. Some people really love it, but a lot of players hate playing against it. So in our Commander products, we're not really we try not to make like a discard themed Commander deck, as an example. But in some of our ancillary products, turns out those are great places to put cards that are that fill out these themes so the Commander players who want to build them can, but that a lot of people, especially newer players, won't run into them. And so Tiny Bones is a great example of that. It's a discard matters Commander, but it's in Jumpstart, so it's not going to necessarily show up on the brand new Commander player's radar. So that's kind of the existence of this thing, besides just being a cute skeleton, which has its own story. Gotta love Tiny Bones. But yeah, it's a discard commander that's out of the range of discard commander. All right, let's look up our next card here. Kinsbale Courier. This is a card from Commander Legends. This is the newest Kithkin made. That's a fun fact to have about it. When we were doing creative concepts for this set, one of the fun thing about it is that we were able to pull cards from anywhere, or creative concepts from anywhere, because Commander Legends spanned all of space and all of time. So panning over to Lorwyn made a lot of sense, and there's a number of Lorwyn things in this set, including some elves, and also, of course, Kithkin here. So that's something fun about Kinsbale Courier. Okay, only a few more left. We've got Bostabilio, who hopefully is still here, with Urza's Saga. All right. Whew. Well, I made a whole video where I talked a bunch about Urza's Saga. So you can go watch that on my Good Morning Magic YouTube channel for more information on it, because I think it's pretty cool. But the thing that's really cool to me is all the Easter eggs in this card. First of all, with the if you look at the abilities here, Urza's Saga is a set all about artifacts, or it was supposed to be all about enchantments, but it's actually an artifact-based set. So it is both an enchantment and it has to do with artifacts, which is very cool. It has references to a lot of different things on here. This one, the second ability, referring to Urza's construct he creates when Urza comes into play. And in the art, there's this incredible thing going on where, and maybe I can pull it up. No, that didn't really work. But it's actually a 3-layered art. So what the artist did was they took they did the art over 3 layers. It's what's called the palimpsest work, where you see the oldest layer super faded, the middle layer slightly less faded, and then the newest layer on top. And it covers Urza's entire life. Really, I implore you, if you're curious, go check out my YouTube video about it, because it's really fascinating, all the stuff they built in here. It's really powerful. Another fun fact, it searches for mana cost, 0 or 1, and this is a tweak we made, not mana value, because it can't get Lotus Bloom, which is a card we wanted to avoid this going to go find. Turns out, still plenty powerful, but at least it can't go get Lotus Bloom. So that's Urza Saga. There's some fun facts about it for you. Once again, though, I have a whole video about it, so go watch that out, and it's a good time. All right, we're going to Kithkin Guy with Leafkin Druid and Leafkin Avenger. Leafkin Druid. So we had an elemental sub-theme in Core Set 2021, and we also had a 4 more creatures theme, a go wide theme in Core Set 2021. And oftentimes, a lot of commons are just created by looking at your themes, being like, hey, we need this thing, we need this thing, I've got 1 card slot, boop, here we go, and you combine them together. And that's kind of where this card came from, of just, that, that's the thing we wanted to do. Kithkin Guy asks, are they from Lorwyn? And was Renin 6 who set the forest on fire? I don't know any details about what Renin 6 may or may not have done. I believe Leafkin, I don't know. I don't want to say they are. I actually don't know where Leafkin Druid and Avenger are from. Maybe Matt Tabak can go look up the art description or something. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it might be from their own Leafkin-y plane, because Leafkin was not a proper name in Lorwyn. So I don't know that off the top of my head, but I don't think so. And then Leafkin Avenger, I think that's what you're kind of asking about, was the Leafkin. I think it'd be cool someday, though, if we saw an entire world that was full of the Leafkin. That could be pretty cool. Maybe someday that'll happen. And then last but not least, I want to give a big shout out to a certain random guy who has done a bang up job the entire stream long of keeping track of all the cards. You've been amazing. I could not do it without you. Let's talk after this and see if we can get you for another one of these if it happens in the future. Literally, the stream would have probably not been possible without you, because I would have been having to keep scroll. So thank you. You to add 1 card here at the end, and it is Vraska Relic Seeker. Vraska Relic Seeker is right here. Right, this is from Ixalan. So we knew we wanted to do Vraska. She was big in the story, and we wanted to do a big Planeswalker. One thing we think about a lot with Planeswalkers is having repeated kill on a Planeswalker can be really frustrating, because you put it down, you kill something, you play another creature, you kill their thing. Also, they play out, then maybe they play another creature, you play a second one and kill it. That's a big problem. But it particularly becomes a problem when your Planeswalker can kill other Planeswalkers. So I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe that originally it was just -3 destroy target permanent, or destroy target non-land permanent. Maybe kind of like, I think the original Vraska, which this is calling back to. That, of course, is, if I can find her here, is Vraska the Unseen, right? So the original Vraska had -3 destroy target non-land permanent. The problem we found with this was that it became this standoff of you don't want to cast the first one. Because if I play my first Vraska and I kill something, and they play their Vraska and kill mine, then I'm losing the Vraska war, and it's a really big problem. So, Vraska Relic Seeker, this -3 was designed to kind of get around that. You can't hit a Planeswalker, because that way you can't play your Vraska to kill their Vraska. So that's how we got around that a little bit with that -3. Other than that, I think it's just, a cool Planeswalker design. Need to see Vraska on the high seas. So there's a fun fact for you. Speaking of fun facts, a certain random guy is letting me know right now in the chat, 96 cards or cycles were discussed today. That is nuts. Yes, share the full list if you would not mind. Part of me says I want to take 4 more cards to get to an even 100. All right, I'll take the first 4 cards someone shares. Okay, first 4 cards. I see Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. I'll give a really Gore Muldrak. That's Nykthos, Gore Muldrak, Cod, and Nephilim. Okay, so those are going to be the first 4 cards. Because I want to get to 100. I can't say no. So those are the first 4 I saw. Let's add 4 more to that list that just happened there. So I'm going to go over these 4, and then I am going to be done at about the 3.5 hour mark. So Nykthos, and these are the ones going to go a little faster. But Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Fun story about this card. I actually, you know what? I might have something special for everybody. Hold on 1 second. This will be worth it. Hold on just a second. I think I have it right here. I make no guarantees if I have this or not. But let's see. See if I do. And if I do, it's gonna be a really cool moment. And if I don't, I'm gonna look kind of silly. Aha! Here it is. Check this out. Here is the original playtest card, or one of the original playtest cards for Nykthos. Let's see if I can get that picked up there. So there it is, Shrine to Nyx. Looks pretty similar, right? Pretty cool. But you might notice something's missing from this card. What's missing? Well, in the very beginning, it was not legendary. How about that? Yeah, that changed. The card still turned out plenty powerful, as you know, without legendary. But that just goes to show that sometimes cards really can change. So how about that? You literally asked me about a card, and I had the original version of the card hanging out right there. So that's pretty cool. All right, 97 cards. On to card number 98. It's going to be Gore Muldrak. I have a fun story about Gore Muldrak. Gore Muldrak, the Amphanologist. So let's see. Gore Muldrak is early on. Ethan Fleischer had the idea to do a Gore Muldrak, and because it's a character reference in flavor text. It shows up on these Amphin, okay, who are referenced on 2 prior cards, Amphin Cutthroat in Magic 2012, and then Amphin Pathmage in Magic 2015. So we literally built a whole thing around these 2 cards. The original Gore Muldrak Amphanologist said, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card for every 5 creature types you control among creatures you have, rounded down. Which was cool, and I was excited about it, and it's almost like what Volo is doing. And then somebody, maybe it was Matt Tabak, I can't remember, said, hey, Gavin, do you realize that with Changelings, you're just going to like draw 45 cards with this? And I realized it had to change. So I handed the set off to Jules, and he came up with a different design. I think this design is brilliant, and I absolutely love it. So, all right. That is card number 98. Let's go on to card number 99, which is Cod by Lorelei. Thanks for coming in Lorelei. So let me tell you a fun story about Cod, and I'm glad Lorelei asked this question. So the Mystery Booster playtest cards were mostly, not entirely, but mostly designed by me. I made most of them. And one of the things I thought it would be fun to do is make a Homerid Lord. It's always kind of a joke. We'll get Homerids someday. And we have gotten some. There's Homerid Explorer in Dominaria. And Lorelei loves Homerids. So this card was actually inspired by Lorelei, who's in the chat right now. And I was like, I should make a funny Lorelei Lord. And so I came up with them, and I thought a fun little gag would be if it also referenced one that didn't exist, which is where Nautilids came from. Up until the very end, Nautilids were actually called Yonarids, I think, as a nod to magic designer Yanni Skolnick. But that was deemed too self-referential. We don't normally do vanity cards, so I changed that. Or I think editing actually changed that. Probably whoever the editor was at the time. Another fun fact about this card, Lord of Atlantis, right? We all love Lord of Atlantis, or at least the professor does. Lord, oh hey, the artist for this card's in the chat even? Tabak you were the artist? That's amazing. The whole gang is here, everybody. Check that out. No, I thought the art was Dave Humphreys. Dave Humphreys is the artist, right, for this card? Dave, are you out there somewhere? I don't know. If Dave is in the chat, hello, Dave. Good to have you. Anyway, talking about this card. Fun fact is, oh hey, Dave. Glad to have you here. Thanks for watching. So fun fact about COD. So Lord of Atlantis, super cool. Atlantis Atlantis, Atlantis, Atlan Shis, Atlan Shis, Atlan Shis. Atlantis, and the way it works in the Magic world, is over time it turned into Atlantis came from Atlan Shis, basically. It was a like traders or something were happening, and it was just a merging of the name Atlan Shis. So that's how Atlantis and is canonically a thing that can exist in Magic, even though Atlantis is a real world thing, because it came from Atlan Shis. So I thought it would be fun with this card to have Merfolk be included, because it was like the envoy between Atlan Shis and the Merfolk, and there's a whole storyline there with the Merfolk and the Homerids and all kinds of stuff. You can go read it. It's pretty wonky. It includes a time portal that creatures walk through in Empress Galliena. You can go watch it on your own time. But yeah, that's just the story there. And then last, the final card that I'm going to get, because I want to get to card 100 and I could not say no, are the Nephilim, suggested by C. Diego FC. We're going to close out on this. So the Nephilim were before my time at Wizards. I played a lot of this one in a casual format I played before Commander existed, called Glint Eye Nephilim. And the format was called Type Dan Gray. It was like a big thing on the West Coast. But Glint Eye Nephilim was the one I always played. Anyway, this card was, and this cycle was in Ravnica, or in Guild Pact rather, and it was the first ever 4 color card cycle. I think it was kind of probably done, I don't know for sure, but if I were to guess, it was done because we had never done it before. That was probably the main reason why they existed. I'll talk about the main thing I get questions about now, which is why not errata these to be legendary. I'm not going to get into the full argument, but we don't errata cards that way. We don't just go back and make old cards legendary or take a legendary off of cards. Someday, maybe we will do something fun and we will throw back the Nephilim and have them be legendary. And I think in the future, we will eventually make other 4-color legendary cards. But 4-color cards are really hard to make, as I talked about when I talked about Kiri and Kyrnos and Tiro. I can never get their name correct, but that card earlier. Often they're defined by what the mana cost is missing. And in this case, Glint Eye Nephilim would be missing white. So these days, if we were to make it, it would be defined by missing white mana. A lot of the time, it's really hard to make something that really fits all 4 colors, which is why these cards are all over the place, right? Glint Eye Nephilim is a weirdo. Dune Brood Nephilim is a total weirdo. Ink Shredder Nephilim, totally weird. And then, for some reason, Yordle Nephilim is just like kind of a reasonable Magic card that still isn't connected to the others. But I do say, as always in Commander, rule 0, as Dr. Unks is saying in chat, if you want to play with one as your commander and you bring it to a game I'm playing, go for it. It's not going to bother me. So no, we're not going to errata these to be legendary, but maybe someday you will see more 4 mana colored legendary commanders.
Congratulations! You made it to the end. I'm proud of you. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and if you want to see more like this, go subscribe over on twitch.tv/Gavin Verhey. So would you like more episodes like this? If so, let me know in the comments down below. And where should I stream? Twitch? YouTube? Somewhere else? Let me know that too. I'll talk with you again soon. And in the meantime, may you have a lot of fun learning about your favorite cards. You got this. Or Bucknard's Everfull Purse. It made them feel different from the D20 rolling cards. It wasn't just the same chart those cards used, but scaled down. The second is we found ways to mitigate the variance. For example, there's a cycle of cards where you add something to your result, which helps you set up the stronger effect. Another cycle